Chapter 169. Yunzi sighed. He was not sighing at the fact that his former disciple's cultivation was destroyed, nor was he sighing at the fact that his former disciple was eaten so casually. He was sighing at their stupidity. However, there was nothing to sigh about. He knew that the stupidity of these cultivators was the result of the inheritance of Daotong and Kenzo. It was not the will of one person or a few people, but the result of thousands of years of choices. He was a genius who started cultivating at the age of 40. Now he was 132 years old, and it took him 86 years to reach the realm of enlightened master. The one sitting on the ground was 113 years old, and he had been cultivating for 113 years. He was a Taoist from a cave, and his parents were both cultivators. However, due to his lack of talent, he only reached the realm of emptiness after 113 years. There were many Taoists like him, and the swordsmen were even more demanding. This was under the condition that they had almost no distractions and were wholeheartedly cultivating. Yunzi knew that he was a smart person, but he also knew that if everyone in Daotong was as smart as him, they would have fallen apart a long time ago. A group of smart people with great power and ambition. Smart people who were no different from those in the secular world. How could there still be Daotong and Kenzo? They would have plotted against each other and killed each other. However, he still sighed at their stupidity. Their power, which was not considered strong in his eyes, made them lose the instinct to seek benefits and avoid harm that everyone in the secular world had. He sighed again and looked at Chang Pingzi without sorrow or joy. Why didn't you hide well? The Taoist on the ground looked at him with numb eyes. His lips and fingers were trembling, but now they were no longer trembling. Only his eyes occasionally moved, emitting the light of despair. That is hatred. Hatred with scales and horns. Yunzi looked at him. His tone was not angry, but it did not sound like he was comforting either. He used to be a great demon in the realm of mysterious. He only needed one finger to kill me. Although he is heavily injured, he is still hatred. Chang Pingzi could no longer speak. Li Yunxin's spiritual power pierced through his snow mountain, but it didn't completely destroy it. Therefore, he was able to live for another hour, an extremely painful and unimaginable hour. Now that the cultivator had reached the end of his life, the pain he felt was almost equal to the total amount of torture he had suffered in the previous hour. He stared at Yunzi, hoping that he could free him. However, his master did not seem to intend to do so. Only then did Chang Pingzi realize this was his punishment. But he did not even have the strength to express regret or anger. This won't do. Sigh. Yunzi sighed again. He looked at Chang Pingzi, as if he was looking at a disappointing child. You guys are typical cultivators. Born in the blessed enclave. One's aptitude was better than most people in the secular world. From the moment he was born, he had started cultivating, ignoring the affairs of the world. Perhaps you still don't know that in this world, there are people who would kill for a mouthful of food. That's a good thing. In this way, your desires are not strong, and you are wholeheartedly focused on cultivation. Even if he were to walk in the secular world in the future, he would still be high and mighty. Your world is already very difficult to shake. When Yunzi said this, Chang Pingzi's pupils began to slacken. He blinked as if he was relieved. He could finally get rid of this terrible pain. But his master raised his hand, and a stream of spiritual energy was injected into his body through the air. His temporary vitality was rejuvenated, and at the same time, it was followed by a tsunami-like pain. A series of the most vicious curses quickly appeared in Chang Pingzi's heart. But he was not good at it, and he did not even know how to curse. Yunzi did not care about his pain. It seemed that he just did not want to lose an audience. Green smoke rose from the incense burner in the room, and the fierce sunlight penetrated the wool carpet within one step of the door. Outside the window, the trees swayed gently and rustled. The Taoist in the true realm lowered his eyes. That's why I said this won't do. He sighed. They need smart people like me. They need smart people like me to do some evil things. They need smart people like me, who have the strength, brains, and desire to face the coming catastrophe. That's why I have to become the leader of a sect. And that sect should be the sharp knife. Don't go through the catastrophe, and don't abandon any desire. Just pursue the ultimate power. He was silent in thought for a while, and then he raised his hand again. A more vigorous spiritual energy was injected into Changpingzi's body. Say it. Because of this spiritual energy, the dying Taoist priest was finally able to speak despite the extreme pain he was in. He should have said a series of curses, but as Yunzi said, the idea he had formed in more than 100 years made him say something else. If we don't go through the catastrophe, how can we improve our cultivation? How can we forget? We don't need to do that. Yunzi looked at him calmly. Why do we have to go through the catastrophe? Or they are afraid that we will lose our nature. Or they are afraid that we will not be able to improve. But as far as I know, there is a sect that cultivates Taoist magic arts and swordsmanship at the same time. And they don't go through the catastrophe. They go out into the world, and their strength is so strong that even I am shocked. You don't know about this. I don't know whether the two saints know, but I do. In them, I see what people who possess great strength, but don't abandon their emotions and desires are like. They are a group of lunatics. But we are a group of old people. Yunzi closed his eyes. Lunatics can change and destroy the world, but old people can't stop them. I am willing to become a lunatic, and many people in Daotong and Kinzo will become lunatics. We will be the first group of martyrs. But the Taishang, the emptiness boundary Taoist's life force began to weaken again. Even Yunzi couldn't prolong his life for much longer. The Taishang forgets emotions? Hee. Yunzi laughed coldly. Let's first figure out why the two saints have been in the Taishang forgets emotions realm for 1,000 years, but still haven't ascended. The light in Changpingzi's eyes finally died out. Yunzi gazed at his corpse and shook his head in pity. You are also a martyr. It was a moonless night, but the wind was strong. The flowers of the acacia and moonlight outside the house were blown off the trees, covering half of the courtyard. The fragrance of the flowers mixed with the smell of the soil, but it smelled surprisingly good. Li Yunqin sat on a rattan chair under the porch half reclining. He was using a thin wolf hairbrush to draw on a white paper fan. He was painting a landscape, half painted and half painted, but he was only half finished. Strictly speaking, this painting wasn't very good. The composition and blank space were both problematic. Apart from the experienced brushwork, there was nothing special about it. But he seemed to be doing this just to get rid of the boredom. After a few strokes, he would stop and think about it. At the moment, he was temporarily staying in one of the properties of the Yu residence. There was a courtyard with 3 entrances about a quarter of an hour away from Taoshi Road. The person who took care of him, and Lu Laodao, was a middle-aged scholar, who called himself Mr. Li. He was extremely ugly. The first impression that left on Li Yunqin was that he had a strange appearance. But he was unexpectedly polite to Lu Laodao. His words were occasionally probing, as if he didn't believe that this Lu Gongzan was the Lu Gongzan that day in the Yu residence. He pulled Lu Laodao to the front yard to drink and make merry, but he never looked at Li Yunqin. No matter what, he was a smart person, and could see through some inside information. He sat under the porch, enjoying the wind. After a while he seemed to be tired. He put the brush on the brush holder, blew the ink on the fan, and closed it. But when he was about to close his eyes, he found that there was a dot of light on the crown of the acacia tree in the courtyard. He opened his eyes and looked around lazily. He found that there was a bright moon on the crown of the tree. It was indeed a bright moon, a golden round, flat moon like in comic books. There were a few clouds curling around it. The crescent moon emitted a gentle light that illuminated the entire courtyard. The sound of the wind stopped, and the voices in the front yard disappeared. Then, a small human figure appeared in the moon. It grew bigger and bigger, as if it was walking over from afar. In a few steps it walked out of the moon. It lifted its feet and stepped on the white clouds beside the moon, walking step by step into the courtyard. But this person was not a moon fairy, but a moon immortal. He looked to be in his 40s and wore an unusually soft, unwrinkled Taoist robe. 5 strands of hair were as black as ink, but his face was fair and clear. He landed in the courtyard and stood with his hands behind his back. He looked at Li Yunqin and said, I heard that the Lord Tongtian is the most unyielding and hot-tempered, and that he has a decisive and murderous temperament. Now he has fallen to living with a secular person? Li Yunxin stared at him seriously for a while, then closed his eyes. None of your business. The newcomer was not angry. He stood with his hands behind his back and said indifferently, "It seems that is not entirely true. Now that I have exposed your identity, you are not anxious or impatient." Li Yunxin still ignored him. This time, Yunzi smiled slightly. It is said that dragons like to say shocking things, and the ancients were not deceiving me. It is just that the Lord Tongtian hibernating here is not a long-term plan, right? After saying this, he gently waved his hand. Then, two children in colorful clothes walked down from the bright moon on the acacia tree. They worked together to carry a soft chair out and placed it for Yunzi to sit on. The Lord Tongtian used a good strategy, Yunzi said calmly. I previously thought that demons might be scheming people, but wild and unruly divine beasts like the Lord Tongtian are disdainful. But recently, I have observed the Lord Tongtian's plans, and feel that he is meticulous and calm. If it was not for me, I am afraid that others would have fallen into the Lord Tongtian's trap. These words seemed to have finally aroused Li Yunxin's interest. He half opened his eyes, revealing a strange evil smile. A row of fine and sharp teeth flashed under the bright moonlight. Oh, a trifling true-state cultivator was actually able to see through my plan? Hey, tell me about it. He then opened his eyes completely. A pair of demonic golden eyes stared at Yunzi. If you are wrong, I will eat you alive. Yunzi laughed loudly. The Lord Tongtian has fallen into such a situation, but his prestige has not diminished. He is really a great demon. But I already know that when the Lord Tongtian fought with the Ghost Emperor that day, both his Dharmakaya and true body were seriously injured, and almost both his body and soul were destroyed. It is also sad to think about it. Two dragons' son, one died, and the other was injured in just a few days. At this point, Yunzi changed the topic. Lord Tongtian, do you know how I saw through your identity? There is no need for me to hide. Yunzi smiled and said to himself, it is said that when the old man in Dongting saw the Lord Tongtian for the first time, his personal ability was similar to that of Song Yunzi of the Danding school of Shangqing sect. But when he saw you a few days ago, your personal ability had already entered the state of perfection. The speed of your improvement is really amazing. However, I know that the Lord Tongtian is a born monster in the mysterious state. When his Dharmakaya and true body were injured, his personal ability was also damaged. It is naturally very fast to recover. But such a speed is still too slow. Li Yunxin stopped talking and stared at him fiercely with a pair of golden eyes. Yunzi got excited. He stood up from the bed and paced for 2 steps. Because the Lord Tongtian wants to recultivate. This is a good opportunity. His tone gradually became cold, and he looked at Li Yunxin with bright eyes. The Lord Tongtian used to be notorious in the Yi Kingdom and the Li Kingdom. He cultivated the way of bad wish. Although it is the easiest way to improve, there are many hidden dangers. Before that, your personal ability was almost destroyed, and you also knew that the Daotong Kenzo would definitely go to the Tongtian swamp to hunt the Ghost Emperor. You certainly couldn't feel at ease. So you escaped to the Wei River. Then you knew what happened here, and you also knew that I, the Lord Dongting, and the Golden Rock Girl suspected each other. So you created the dragon cult. Then you set up a trap in the city and killed the Qing Liangji. So, we were all on guard against each other, and thought that the dragon cult was the work of the other party. The Lord Tongtian not only hid his identity, but also obtained the power of wish. Now he obtained the good wish, no wonder your progress is slower. What I said now, is it the truth? Li Yunxin slowly sat up straight from the rattan chair, no longer pretending to be fierce. He stared at Yunzi for a while and sneered. You are smarter than I thought. Do you know where the Lord Tongtian made the first mistake? Yunzi said with a smile. The first time you went to Mount Jun to meet the Lord Dongting. When you boarded the boat, the shrimp soldier saw it clearly. You are actually afraid of water. Then that night when you fought with Song Yunzi, you didn't cross the river unless you found a boat. Ha ha ha. Yunzi threw his head back and laughed. The secret historical records of the Daotong say that although the Lord Tongtian is the dragon's son, his real body is the body of a leopard. As a dragon's, he does not like water. It is actually true. After Yunzi said this, he saw Li Yunxin on the rattan chair was startled. He clapped his hands. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I also know that the Lord Tongtian entered the city and went to the Yu mansion. He patiently contacted the secular people because he wanted to borrow their power. He borrowed the power of the secular people to do the good deeds of building bridges and paving roads. He thought that this would not attract my attention, but he did not know that the Yu family felt that you are my people, so they turned around and asked me. After saying this, he paused and stared at Li Yunxin. And today the Lord Tongtian left the city. I am afraid it is not to avoid my eyes and ears. It is to bean seeds. He sneered and sighed. Lord of Tongtian, do you think I'm a cultivator who doesn't know the ways of the world? But he does not know that I was a state farmer before I became a Taoist. Other people may not know about bean seeds, but I do. At this season, the farmers are looking forward to rain. When the Lord Tongtian, your dragon cult grows in the city, then you will recruit more believers and make a vow to you, asking for rain. At that time, when you use your supernatural power again and attract a storm, the power of wish will increase crazily. It is a good plan, but I have seen through it. Yunzi walked 2 steps, returned to the couch and sat down. He looked at Li Yunxin, whose face was as dark as water. What other plans does the Lord Tongtian have? Chapter 170. From the moment Yunzi walked out of the moon to the moment he asked this question, only a quarter of an hour had passed. However, he seemed to have hidden those words in his heart for a long time. Today, he could finally pour them out freely. Li Yunxin only stared at him, his eyes fierce and gloomy. After a quarter of an hour of silence, the pupils of the golden eyes suddenly shrank into a thin line. Do you know what happened to the last person who thought he was smart in front of me? Yunzi looked at him with a tolerant gaze. I want to hear about Lord Tongtian's means. It's certainly not something we can imagine. The last person was a stinky Taoist called Qing Liangzi. Li Yunxin looked at him and said slowly, he thought I was a servant, so he blocked the road and wanted to kill me. Ah, that idiot. He squinted his eyes, opened his mouth, and sighed in a low and happy voice. I first asked him to tell me everything he knew, just like you did today. Then, when he thought he had figured out my plan, I killed him. First, I smashed his body into pieces, and then smashed his soul into nothingness. That idiot didn't know why he died. Don't you think it's satisfying? Yunzi smiled and shook his head, pointing in the air. Then, a few acacia flowers fell from the trees and floated in the air, emitting a soft light, like beautiful little lamps. That Qing Liangzi was my good friend. Alas, what a pity. Yunzi smiled and sighed. He was a crazy person, but crazy in an interesting way. I used to know that there was a problem in Daotong and Kinzo, but I didn't know where it was. But he told me some things, and pointed out the way for me. It's not an exaggeration to say that he was a master of one word. Lord Tongtian, you killed my good friend, a master of one word. What should I do to you? Li Yunxin raised his head slightly. An extremely faint but scorching mist rose from his nostrils, ears, and mouth. He said in a low voice, but his voice already contained a bit of a wild beast's hoarseness and violence. What does a mere true realm little person want to do to me? Yunzi sensed the danger, but he didn't care. His smile became more tolerant and gentle. He heaved a long sigh of relief, and raised a finger, pointing at the bright moon on the crown of the acacia tree. Lord Tongtian, do you know that this thing is called the treasure mirror of mysterious light? It was a magical weapon that I had refined for more than 60 years. It's best at seeing through a cultivator's realm. I value my life, and I don't like to do things that I'm not prepared for. Therefore, he cherished this magical treasure very much. Therefore, he knew that Lord Tongtian was only at the peak of the transcendent state. The Lord Tongtian wants to practice the path of goodwill. As dragons, you are experienced and knowledgeable, and you should know that demons are the same as us human cultivators. When they reach the profound state and break through to the Taishang forgetting realm, they have to go through the tribulation. To go through the tribulation, they have to abandon their emotions and desires. That's why Lord Tongtian wants to practice the path of goodwill again. As far as I know, when the path of bad will reaches the peak of the profound state, it's really full of inner demons. They don't need to go through the tribulation, but they have to destroy their own cultivation. But without the heart of Tao, how can they understand the Taishang forgetting realm? Daotong has the heart of Tao, and Kinzo has the heart of swordsmanship. Demons and Yin spirits isn't the reason why Lord Tongtian stopped at the peak of the transcendent state to find this heart. Yunzi spread his hands. Is Lord Tongtian really willing to break through the peak of the transcendent state and enter the true state and lose this search? What should I call it? As far as I know, except for the Shinryu, no demon can find something like the heart of Tao or the heart of swordsmanship. Is Lord Tongtian willing to give up this opportunity? Is he waiting for the next realm to fall to the intent realm and then recultivate and find that little bit of light again? At that time, Lord Tongtian might not meet someone as easygoing as I am. Li Yunxin fell silent and frowned, thinking for a long time. Yu Yunzi had inadvertently mentioned something that confirmed one of his thoughts. There is no free lunch in this world. Daotong and Kinzo cultivators have to go through the tribulation. They have to find the heart of Tao and the heart of swordsmanship at the peak of the transcendent state, and then break through to the true state. Although it's extremely unlikely, even if there's a glimmer of hope, people are not willing to give up the Taishang forgetting realm. Demons, on the other hand, can absorb the power of will, and their cultivation can skyrocket. But this debt has to be paid. At the peak of the profound state, when they break through to the Taishang forgetting realm, most demons can't pay it back. Li Yunxin, he never thought so far ahead. Until today he was forced. When no one forced him, he was gentle and indifferent, at least it seemed. But if someone thought he was easy to bully and poked him for fun, they would have to face terrible and crazy revenge. But at this point, he really didn't think about the Taishang forgetting realm. But he also didn't want to end up as a great demon at the peak of the profound state. There was still someone above him, and it was very uncomfortable. But Daotong looked for the heart of Tao, and Kinzo looked for the heart of swordsmanship, all to not lose the heart of Tao when they abandoned their desires. Although he didn't want to admit it, it was a fact. Desire was the source of all living beings in this world. Desire. Li Yunxin had it. But the so-called emotions they wanted to abandon. Li Yunxin raised his head. The ferocious expression from before slowly faded away. He even yawned. A cloud of mist gushed out from his mouth, curled up, and dissipated in the air. Easy to talk to? What do you mean? His silence made Yunzi believe in his own judgment. The Taoist priest smiled and stretched out his hand to push away an acacia flower that was slowly drifting in front of him. Actually, this humble Taoist would like to have a try and see what kind of experience it would be to kill a dragon's son, who was once in the profound realm as a true master. But after thinking about it, I have more important things to do. Lord Tongtian is also a smart man. He should know that in this world a great calamity is coming. Shinryu established a dynasty. Although in the eyes of my Daotong and Kinzo, it is loose. But it is still a dynasty. This is the first non-human dynasty, since there were demons in this world. Many cultivators don't agree with this. They think that demons are always in a state of disunity, and that this so-called dynasty is a joke. But they don't notice one thing. In the 2,000 years since the establishment of this dynasty, not a single great demon in the profound realm has been killed. But what about before? Every few decades, hundreds of years, there would be a great demon in the profound realm falling in battle. Whether you admit it or not, and those short-sighted cultivators admit it or not, the Dragon Dynasty does exist, and with just 2,000 years of Shinryu authority, it has restrained all the demons in the world. Your power is getting stronger and stronger. Li Yunxin sneered, but didn't say anything. Yunzi didn't care about his attitude, and instead fell into deep thought. So the current situation of the world is, in reality, Daotong and Kinzo rule the humans, and the Dragon Dynasty rules the demons. In reality, this is already the tacit situation for 2,000 years. One after another, human dynasties have divided up the known world of our heavenly sphere. But just take the kingdom of Qing as an example. Take the city of Wei as an example. The magistrate of the city of Wei issued a decree in the magistrate's office, and it spread throughout the entire Wei prefecture. But in this Wei prefecture, such a large piece of land, the city of Wei only occupies 1%. The land that the humans rest on is only 30 to 40%. Where are the other lands? They are occupied by demons. Demons don't build their own prefectures, but for a great demon like the Lord Dongting, if he really goes crazy, then the magistrate of the city of Wei is nothing. Fortunately, there are Daotong and Kenzo. Demons are entrenched everywhere, but they don't dare to go crazy. Therefore, the Lord Tongtian, the Dragon Dynasty, is an invisible dynasty that overlaps with the empires of the humans. This is something that not even many demons are aware of. I never listened to anyone's orders. Li Yunxin was full of malice and muttered darkly. Yunzi smiled tolerantly, as if he was looking at a child or a pitiful opponent that he had conquered. Therefore, since there is a continuously growing dragon dynasty, and humans are flourishing under the protection of Daotong and Kenzo, then there is a problem. The more humans flourish, the stronger you demons that rely on the power of will to cultivate. The stronger the demons are, the weaker Daotong and Kenzo are. We are digging our own graves. Therefore, Daotong, Kenzo, and demons will have a war. In fact, I am very suspicious. Is it really because we watched the dragon dynasty grow stronger, and thus angered the celestial being, so that there has been no news of the celestial being for the past 3,000 years, and the two sages dare not ascend? Yunzi looked at Li Yunxin with bright eyes. But Daotong and Kenzo are not ready yet. They are cultivators, but not warriors. You are warriors. Li Yunxin looked at him lazily and sneered. Taoist. You have entered the delusion. This is your delusion. Delusion? Ha ha ha. Yu Yunzi laughed happily. No, this is my Dao heart. I used delusion to transform my Dao heart, and used delusion to enter the true realm, to kill all the demons in the world. This is my delusion, and also my Dao heart. Because they are not ready, I want them to be ready. Yunzi's 5 strands of long beard moved without wind, and he looked like an immortal. So I won't kill you, even if I can kill you with a finger now. I was watching before because I didn't know the inside story. Now that I have seen through your plan, I still haven't killed you, because I want to use you. You think I don't know? That Lu Ling is in Lord Dongting's lair. At this time, there is also Dragon Sun hatred. Dragon Sun hatred. In Wei River, he colluded with Lord Dongting, and his ferocious nature exploded, and he killed 36 cultivators of Daotong. First, there was the Ghost Emperor Order, and 4 high-level cultivators fell. Then Dragon Sun killed dozens of low-level cultivators. You see, they have quality and quantity. If Daotong and Kenzo fight against demons, how can they protect the world? And at that time, I was in the city of Wei, and I used to live in the secular world, and I know the situation of the city of Wei and Wei River the best. So, I have to be the vanguard. Once I get them, Yu Yunzi heaved a sigh of relief. No one can take them away from me. Those people, ha ha ha, they don't know any tricks. I will get more, until I can. He suddenly stopped, and looked at Li Yunxin with a strange expression. Li Yunxin also looked at him. After a while he asked, So, what do you need me to do? Undisguised joy appeared on Yunzi's face. He clapped his hands and laughed. Good. You are indeed the great demon Lord Tongtian. Such courage. If not for the fact that you are not of my race, I, Yunzi, will definitely make friends with you. I am not interested. Li Yunxin snorted coldly. Yunzi, who was in high spirits, did not care about the other person's bad attitude at all. He twirled his beard and smiled. What Lord Tongtian wants to do is to kill those 36 cultivators. Lord of Tongtian must have noticed it, right? They are among the workers, you can see them at a glance. After Lord Tongtian kills them, I will not disturb you to continue practicing the path of goodwill, because only when Lord Tongtian enters the true state and finds the heart of Dao, can he become a strong enemy of Daotong and Kenzo. I need a strong enemy. That old thing Lord Dongting is trapped in the lake, and can't go out more than 10 feet. So he is not a threat. But a dragon son who used to be in the mysterious state, and now has found the heart of Dao, is the most terrible enemy. Yunzi sighed comfortably. Demon, find the heart of Dao. Except for the divine dragon who was born to be tyrannical, There is no such example. Whether the war starts or not, I will get what I want. And you, Lord Tongtian, are my opportunity. So you see, you can be used by me. If you let me do this, I can stay in the city of Wei to manage my power. At the same time, I need you to always exist and become stronger, so that this situation can continue. Yunzi looked at Li Yunxin seriously. Lord Tongtian, do you want to do this? Li Yunxin drooped his eyelids and sneered. What if I don't do it? Yunzi stopped smiling and said word by word. Then, you are courting death. The situation that Li Yunxin flew into a rage as Yunzi expected did not happen. This Lord Tongtian just looked at him gloomily. So he understood that Li Yunxin had fully understood the current situation. No matter how arrogant a demon was, he still wanted to live. He snorted. Even if you don't do it, I still have other opportunities. That Lu Ling is in the hands of Lord Dongting. If I plan it, it will still be the same situation, but it will take more effort. But for you, as long as I use a talisman in my hand, another cultivator of the mysterious state will come within 5 days, and you will only die. Now I am telling you this because I am in a good mood. If you make I unhappy, you will end up with your tendons pulled out and your skin peeled off. You're on your own, and think about it carefully. After saying this, Yunzi flicked his sleeves, and his body suddenly turned into a golden light, and went straight into the mysterious light treasure mirror. And the 2 boys in colorful clothes who were standing beside him suddenly turned into a green light, and disappeared. 2 albizia flowers fell from the sky. The night wind blew again, and the voices in the front yard came again. Li Yunxin slightly frowned in the dark, sitting still. Hatred was afraid of water? He really didn't know at that time. Chapter 171. Therefore, when Lu Laodao came back from the front yard, he saw Li Yunxin sitting alone in the dark corridor. Laodao knew nothing about what had happened in the courtyard, but he could tell that Li Yunxin was not happy. He didn't think that Li Yunxin was unhappy, because he had left him alone. He knew that Brother Xian was not always fond of crowds, nor was he always lonely. But Mr. Li was certainly not willing to join in the fun. He dragged a rattan chair to Li Yunxin's side, turned his face sideways and burped. What's wrong with Brother Xian? Li Yunxin glanced at him in the dark. That Yunzi took the bait. Lu Laodao was stunned. The good wine made him feel comfortable, but it also slowed his thinking. After a while he laughed. Oh, Brother Xian is so smart. He was here just now? After being stunned for a while he thought again. But Brother Xian, is there anything else? Li Yunxin touched his folding fan and sighed. When we were outside the city, I told you that Yunzi was a smart man. He would use good wish and bad wish to trick me. Now it seems that he is indeed a smart man. He even found some suspicious points, which saved me a lot of trouble. And he did follow the path I designed, making a fuss about good and evil. He even told me a lot of things that I didn't know before. Be reasonable. He is really a good teacher. Then, why is Brother Xian still worried? Is it because his realm is too high? Lu Laodao asked hesitantly. Because he is too smart. Not only is he a smart man, but he is also a smart man with ambition. What the hell? Li Yunxin tapped the back of his hand with his folding fan. He's a cultivator. Why is he doing farming? He even knows about bean seeds. Then, under the night breeze and the smell of alcohol, he told Lu Laodao everything that had just happened. When he finished speaking, Laodao also frowned. He pondered for a long time and asked, This way of speaking? It sounds incredible, but if you think about it carefully it makes sense. As a Daotong cultivator, he was now scheming against Daotong cultivators, and harming his fellow disciples. Harming innocent fellow disciples was a great sin. If he wanted to set up a trap, to use such a method to set up a trap, it would be too unflattering. If you put it that way it does sound like it's true. Li Yunxin sighed softly. You can just make up an excuse to fool a fool. All he had to do was make up a reasonable excuse to deceive ordinary people. If you lie to a smart person, you can make it sound reasonable, but the smart person will still have doubts. At this time, you make up a reason that sounds incredible to deceive. The smart person will think like you. But the smart person will also know what I said above, so he will have doubts again. Therefore, It doesn't matter whether the reason is reasonable or not. For the smart person, whether he can be deceived or not, it's up to the smart person who has been deceived, to believe it or not to believe it. This is also a kind of return to nature to a certain extent. Lu Laodao drank the wine, and was a little confused for a while. After thinking for a while, he still felt that he didn't get the true meaning. He had to ask, then does Brother Xian believe it or not? Li Yunxin glanced at him, and seemed to think it was very funny. Yunzi is indeed a smart person. I have done so many things in Dongting, and the city of Wei before. Some of them I deliberately did to show him, and some of them I didn't want him to know. But now he's seen through everything. Some of the things that I've delayed and done wrong. He's also made up a logical reason for it. And it's self-consistent. What a terrible and smart person he is. The words of this kind of smart person like me. I won't believe a single punctuation mark. Or this guy scares me. Li Yunxin frowned with dissatisfaction. He scares me. Think about it. You were sitting by the weeping willow and white sand bank and fishing happily. Suddenly you were almost dragged into the water by a big fish. And then this big fish talked to you, saying that if you did something for him, he would let you go. Gee, think about what he said. Then, you are looking for death. Li Yunxin was surprised and his eyes were round. He looked at Lu Laodao and pointed to himself. I have always been the one to talk to others like this. He dared to say that to me. He looked at Lu Laodao for a long time. Lu Laodao, who was slow in thinking, said hurriedly, yes, he is too arrogant. I can bear it, but what can't? Li Yunxin put down his hand with satisfaction and turned around. Looking at the dark yard, he curled his lips childishly. There are 2 smart people in the city of Wei. There are many bastards in the shallow waters. I have to kill him. Lu Laodao wanted to ask, Brother Xian, how do you plan to kill him? But he knew it was not a good time to ask about it. If he couldn't think of a way, he would be unhappy for the whole night. He was also afraid that Yunzi had used some tricks and left eyes and ears in the yard. Thus, she didn't say anything and just sat quietly with him. After sitting for a while, he felt sleepy, although he shouldn't slack off at this tense and pessimistic time. But he did feel sleepy because of the wine. He felt a strange contradiction in his heart. The situation was on the verge of exploding. He was not very worried. Li Yunxin was silent for a while, as if he just remembered that he had forgotten about Lu Laodao. He waved his hand to him. Go back to sleep. Taoist Lu wanted to keep him company, but he knew that Li Yunxin didn't like to be around others when he was thinking, unless he wanted to share his ideas and try to get inspiration from others. So he didn't say anything, nodded slightly, and went into the room. Li Yunxin stayed in the yard alone for a while, sighing from time to time. After nearly an hour, the rattan chair creaked. He stood up. He paced around the courtyard for a while before he muttered to himself in a very soft voice. The confidence and ease he had when he was in front of old Taoist Lu had completely disappeared. Smart person, smart person, smart person. What would you, a smart person, do? The voice was very low, almost covered by the rustling of the lush trees in the yard. But under the acacia tree, in a pile of fallen flowers on the ground, a half-broken acacia flower trembled slightly. It caught the fleeting sound in the wind and quickly transmitted it to somewhere. This acacia flower continued to tremble slightly. But after all, without the nourishment of the trees, the longer it trembled, the more dispirited it became. A few more flower filaments fell. And Li Yunxin didn't say anything for a long time. After pacing for another half an hour, he finally lowered his voice and said fiercely, as if he was talking to some existence or to himself, Hey, smart person? Humph. You are a smart person, but I am a madman. A little person in the true state. You bet that I don't dare to enter the true state. Hey. You really don't know what a peerless monster is. Tis-tis-ke. It's a pity that this pretty face can't be preserved. After he said this, the half-broken acacia flower finally lost all its flower filaments and stopped trembling. Li Yunxin snorted in a low voice, flicked his sleeves and walked back to his room. Chapter 172. When the dragon cult came to the city of Wei, they didn't just bring people. They also brought totems. Although the temple under construction was not yet completed, and only the rough framework was seen, the daily worship was necessary, or else the dragon prince would be unhappy. People didn't wonder why the dragon prince was so easily upset, but they thought it was what a god should be like. Therefore, when Li Yunxin and Lu Laodao came to the only quiet small courtyard beside the construction site, many people looked at them with complicated expressions. It was the kind of expression that a group of neighbors who had lived together for more than 10 years and were familiar with each other saw a peddler from another place. This small courtyard used to belong to a widower. On the night when Ling Kongzi fought with the 9th young master, it was on the other side of the street and a little further away, so it wasn't affected. But the house was fine. But the man was. The 60-year-old man couldn't stand the shock and fainted that night. When people found it, the body was already rotten, so no one lived in the house anymore. However, people believed that gods could get rid of filth, and people outside of the city of Wei were not as particular as people in the city. They happily welcomed the golden statue of Dragon Prince that the carpenter dug out from under the loquat tree in his yard that night, and the clay statues of the 5 guardian gods into the yard and settled them down. Now there were always 4 people guarding outside the courtyard, because the statue was indeed made of gold, and people came to worship from time to time. They were away from home, although it was just a long trip from Egret Island to the city of Wei. For Li Yunxin, it was still away from home. They were always unhappy, always worried, and always needed some spiritual sustenance. When these people saw Li Yunxin and Lu Laodao coming, they all strangely stopped talking at the same time. Lu Laodao had prestige in people's hearts. He was the real hierarch in people's hearts. From the very beginning of the dragon cult's emergence to its current scale, it was naturally inseparable from his glib tongue. In the early days, he had done a lot of work dealing with people. After the dragon god cult finally began to be spread and developed by the believers, old Taoist Lu cleverly reduced the number of times he participated in worldly affairs. Thus, his image began to be mysterious and tall again. Such an amiable and mysterious leader had a high prestige among the believers. Otherwise, in such an era, how could there be more than 100 people who left their homes to follow him to the city? Moreover, people could really see that Lao Dao's beard and hair were slowly turning from white to jet black. To the common people, compared to painting formations, incantations, magical treasures, and true realms, this was the true miracle of a god. Therefore, when Lu Laodao pointed to a handsome young man a few days ago and told everybody that this was the Jiaozhu of Shenlong Jiao, nobody raised any objection. However, in private they addressed him as Lu and that person. Now, when people saw that person in front of the door, they didn't say anything and just kept a straight face. However, Lu respectfully let him in and stood guard outside the door. At the same time, he ordered the believers to step back. The hierarch has something to discuss with the guardians. People obeyed him and stepped back obediently, but more than one person guessed that it was because of the roast chicken bought from a shop in the city that morning. For many people, it was the first time in their lives that they had heard of eating chicken in such a way. 15 minutes after Li Yunxin went in, people started to ask about Lu's well-being. It seemed that this was a simple way to show their support for him. Lu Laodao could only smile bitterly in his heart. Li Yunxin walked into the courtyard and went straight to the front hall. As soon as he entered the door, he saw a chaotic scene. Mrs. Sanhua's and Xiao Jiesen's souls were spirits without bodies, so it took some effort for them to show their forms. But it was easier for them not to show their forms. Rat, black cat, white rabbit, and rooster. The 4 spirits transformed from animals, and it also took effort to transform into humans. But after all, animals transformed into humans to cultivate with human meridians. So maintaining a human form was also a kind of cultivation. But Lu Laodao also advised them not to show their forms in front of believers easily, so as to avoid shocking the world and losing their authority and sense of mystery. The 4 new spirits were told by Li Yunxin to listen to the old man's words, so they didn't object. So when he came in, he saw the 4 spirits running around the house. They were either holding drumsticks, fruits, wine cups, or candlesticks in their hands, chasing each other and fighting for them. The black cat sergeant was the most dexterous, holding a crispy and tender drumstick in her left hand and a wine pot in her right hand. While running like a gust of wind, she chewed and drank. The rat spirit that Li Yunxin gave the name Shuck was the senior brother, but it seemed that he was still afraid of the sergeant, the senior sister, so he didn't dare to chase her. He hid in a corner with a plate of salted peanuts in his hands and ate them. His appearance was really shifty-eyed, which made him look a little wretched, but from the limited contact that Li Yunxin had with him, this rat spirit was actually honest and gentle. That was only true for monsters. The chicken spirit was wearing colorful clothes and had a head of messy red hair, shouting, "Senior sister, give me a bite." It seemed that the whole roasted chicken had entered the sergeant's stomach. The rabbit spirit was a young man in human form, fair and clean, but with buck teeth. He squatted on the armchair by the door and stared at the peanuts in his senior brother's hand, wanting to eat, but too embarrassed to ask. Xiao Jessen's soul was attached to a clay statue whose face couldn't be seen clearly, which was still faceless. But the outline of the facial features was vaguely visible, which made Li Yunxin feel a little emotional. Although he had an excellent memory, he had almost forgotten what the girl looked like. Mrs. Sanhua, who was on the gold body, giggled like a lunatic at the running demons and ghosts in the house. It wasn't until she saw Li Yunxin push the door open and come in that she exclaimed, "Ah!" Then she shouted, "Ah, ah! The hierarch is here. Noisy humph. Noisy! Don't be noisy. Ah!" Shuck immediately dropped the plate on the ground and stood up. The rabbit spirit was also shocked and jumped off the chair, trying to transform into his original form, but he held back and ran behind the senior brother. The chicken spirit turned around and saw Li Yunxin, and his eyes widened. "Ah, my king senior sister." The cat spirit turned around and stuffed the drumstick and the flagon into the chicken spirit's hand and kicked him down. Blinking her big eyes, she curtsied pitifully. "My king is here." After chewing for a while, he finally swallowed the food in his mouth. "I must be exhausted these days," Mrs. Sanhua giggled. Hee little demon, you're the laziest." "Ha! My king is here." Did my king bring 3 animals?" "Ha! Where are they?" Li Yunxin walked straight to the armchair by the door and sat down comfortably. Not replying to the cat spirit, he only said to Sanhua, "I don't have 3 animals. But there's something else good. Do you want it?" Chapter 173. Although Mrs. Sanhua spoke incoherently, she was not muddle-headed when it came to important matters. Hearing Li Yunxin's words, she immediately screamed like a cat whose tail was stepped on. "Ah, something good. What is it?" "Oh, a body. My body." Li Yunxin smiled. "That's right. It's a body." Maybe she was too excited, too happy and too surprised. Hearing this, Sanhua did not say anything. Li Yunxin was silent for a while and continued to talk. The cat spirit's long eyelashes flickered, and she quietly came over to massage his legs. Her 2 small white fists were like white jade hammers, making him feel numb and comfortable. He let out a long sigh. "That time in the wild forest, if it wasn't for you, I would have died. That night you saved me. I promised you that I would give you a result and a place to go. I also told you some rules. Do you still remember?" Mrs. Sanhua finally spoke. Her voice was still sharp and thin, but it was rare that she did not speak incoherently. First, you can't kill people. Second, you can't marry. Third, hey, you have to have a correct view of the world. You remember it very clearly. Li Yunxin nodded approvingly. You did well, and you were very obedient. You passed the test temporarily. Taoist priest Danqing can give you a body. Taoist priest transcendent can turn illusion into reality, and Taoist priest true state can turn illusion into reality. However, the Taoist priest in the state of the transcendent was a rootless duckweed after all. If the original painting was destroyed, the real body would be gone as well. But Taoist priest true state can use your spirit, or a part of your soul, to turn illusion into reality. But your spirit and spirit will be consumed, and your mind will be damaged. So I have been asking you to possess the painting and the golden body. I don't want to use these two methods for you, because I want to give you something better. I've been thinking about it for the past few days, and I finally figured it out, Li Yunqin said. Although I think this is a safe and feasible method, there are still risks. And once this method works, you'll have to help me do a few things when you get the real body, kill a few people. I need to ask you about this. Will you do it or not? The four monsters in the room all turned to look at the golden sculpture on the incense burner table. Xiao Jiasen's soul turned around and stared at it, seeming a little envious. After a while Sanhua said, "Murder? Aya, the king doesn't allow me to take anyone's life, Aya." "Oh, those aren't humans, they're cultivators and Taoist priests." Li Yunqin spread his hands. "It doesn't count as violating the commandments." Sanhua immediately cried out in joy. Hee, that's good, that's good, hee, kill, quickly give it to me." "Okay." Li Yunqin reached out his hand to touch the fan, and took out a scroll of paper. Then he stood up, shook his hand, and the scroll opened with a swoosh. It was a familiar figure in the painting. Then he slightly frowned, put his fingers together and shouted, "Go!" The painting immediately emitted a burst of green light, and a figure slowly took shape in the green light. Li Yunqin shouted again, "Get on her body!" A cold wind immediately blew in the hall. The Triflower incorporeal spirit body suddenly pounced on the shadow. After another breath, the figure solidified. Li Yunqin stared at her for a while, then asked, "Are you still there?" "Aya, I'm here." It was indeed Sanhua's voice. But she only stood there, not daring to move, as if she was afraid that without Li Yunqin's order, she would damage her new body. Li Yunqin let out a sigh. Then while staring at her he slowly tore the scroll in his hand. The figure was still there. He pointed at the pile of paper on the ground, and the paper immediately turned into ashes. The figure was still there. Li Yunqin stared at Mrs. Sanhua for a while with a complicated expression, and finally let out a long sigh, just as I expected. For the Taoist priests in painting, the state of the transcendent meant turning nothingness into reality. When in the state of emptiness, one could create virtual shadows to scare people. Just like when he used the shadow of the ninth young master to scare Constable Xing in the forest, and earned a chance to escape. But the shadow could be seen, but not touched, it was just a shadow. When in the state of the transcendent, drawing on the paper, one could summon a real form. He drew a green-armored swordsman outside the half-collapsed temple of Mrs. Sanhua in the wild forest, and killed the thief. That was the method of the state of the transcendent. And at that time, although Mrs. Sanhua's spiritual power had barely reached the state of the transcendent, the swordsman that was summoned quickly disappeared when it saw human blood, an object of extreme yang. But when one reached the peak of the state of the transcendent and drew a picture, one could indeed summon a tangible object that was not afraid of any object of extreme yang. But in fact there were restrictions and rules. Otherwise, if a Taoist priest in the state of the transcendent painted every day, he would be able to draw an army on his own. The ability and power of the object summoned by the state of the transcendent depended on 2 points. If it really existed, there was no way to summon it. For example, if a Taoist priest in the state of the transcendent drew a picture of the ninth young master, and the ninth young master really existed, then it could not be summoned. Li Yunqin guessed that this was probably related to the emptiness of this world that Black Bai Yanjun mentioned. And if it was made by one's own imagination, and it was also believed by the public, then the power would be slightly greater. For example, the people of a certain place all believed that there was a mountain god on the mountain, and the appearance would be described in detail. And this power of vow was not enough to produce a Yin god. Once a painter in the state of the transcendent drew it, it would probably be a mountain god. If something was created out of thin air, for example, a drawing of Zhongsan, then it would only be a Zhongsan. An ordinary Zhongsan would not have any hidden attributes, such as strong martial arts skills, demon-like wisdom, etc. However, there was still a limitation in the end. This type of abstruse method, in essence, had a subtle relationship with the emptiness and power of vow. The painter in the state of the transcendent drew a picture and summoned a person, but in reality, He had used some kind of method that was similar to the power of faith, supplemented with Taoist arts. In a certain sense, he had forcefully created a yin god. This process was very strenuous. It would consume the cultivation base of the Taoist priest Danqing. Once the foundation of this yin god, the painting was destroyed, this yin god would also be gone. Once this yin god was brutally killed by an external force, then the Taoist priest Danqing, who had a subtle connection with this yin god, would also be injured. Therefore, using the yin god summoned by the state of the transcendent to fight was actually using the Taoist priest Danqing's life to fight. If it was not a critical moment, no one would be willing to use their own life and cultivation base to play around. However, Li Yunqin had just destroyed the picture scroll. But the figure was still there. This was a successful attempt that he made after connecting it with his experience of seizing Qi Wen's godly position. It really worked. As for the reason, he could only think of one thing. In the other world, this figure still had a wide range of believers. Therefore, it could be preserved. This was the way of the long term. As he thought of these, he saw that Qiao Jiesin, who was attached to the clay sculpture, was staring at him. He did not know if she could understand, but Li Yunqin still shook his head slightly. Not now. With this painting alone, I have already fallen back to the middle stage of the transcendent. You little girl, wait a little longer. Actually, it is not bad that you have received so much incense and the power of vow, and cultivated your own spirit into the real body. Then he looked at the still motionless Sanhua. Let me ask you now. Li Yunqin stayed in the courtyard for a full hour. When he came out, it was already noon. Lu Laodao looked at his face, but he did not see anything. He was just wearing a stern face when he went in, but now he looked calmer. Li Yunqin walked to him and said, "Let's go." Lu Laodao turned around and gave some instructions to the people guarding the door, and then hurried to catch up with Li Yunqin. As soon as the two of them left, the people at the door hurried to the hall to have a look. Chicken bones and cups were scattered all over the floor. So they came for this, a strong and stocky woman said angrily. Then her tone suddenly became gentle. I just feel sorry for my Lu. While the people were complaining about the stolen chicken, Li Yunqin and Lu Laodao saw a little person walking on the street. They were planning to go to Munanju for lunch. Turning into a narrow road, Lu Laodao was about to ask Li Yunqin about the matter, when he heard a knock-knock-knock sound. It sounded like a bamboo board was knocking on the bluestone road. So he turned around and saw it. It was the kind of little person made of green bamboo sold by street vendors. The bamboo was crude, and the bamboo was not even dry. If it was raining, it would crack and mold after a few days at home. But now, this palm-sized green bamboo person was very lively. Using the bamboo poles as its legs, it hopped to the front of Li Yunqin and bowed. Then it asked, My master sent me to ask Lord Tongtian, what do you think about last night's matter? Li Yunqin tilted his head and looked at the little person. He laughed sinisterly. Your master is interesting. Why is he so impatient to kill a fellow practitioner? The green bamboo person bowed again. My master sent me to ask Lord Tongtian, what do you think about last night's matter? Li Yunqin was slightly stunned and snorted. Bah. So it turned out to be this kind of shoddy goods. Hee. Do you want to die? Even if your master didn't say it, I would still kill. After saying this, without waiting for the little person to bow again, he stepped on it. Then, he looked around and saw a sparrow on the wall of the alley. It tilted its head and stared at him with two black bean-like eyes. Li Yunqin looked at it for a while, snorted again and pointed at it. If you want to kill me, I'll let you do it. But if I kill someone, you have to do something for me. The sparrow chirped twice, flapped its wings and flew away. So in the afternoon, news came from the Shangqing Danding Sex Station in City of Wei. The cultivators took action. But this action was more like a child's play to them. It was something they would never lower themselves to do in the past. They would show some shocking tricks in the city and among the believers, but not so brilliant that they couldn't understand it. Then, they would persuade the people that the dragon cult was an evil cult, and that focusing on Taoism was the right way. More than one cultivator thought that this method was very lame, but the reason why they reluctantly tried to do it was because they finally learned a shocking secret. Lord Tongtian, the second son of the dragon, Hatred, disappeared in Tongtianze of the Yi Kingdom a month ago, and his cultivation was almost destroyed. He was the leader of the dragon cult. He was thinking of a way to recultivate his Dharmakaya according to the good wishes of the believers. Usually, these cultivators of the realm of wills and realm of emptiness would never want to be involved in this kind of thing. But this time, they were secretly summoned by their former master and old friends. They were told that the dragon's son Hatred was extremely weak and only had the cultivation of the transcendent state. He planned to recultivate the path of good wishes and find his Taoist heart. It was the best time to kill him. The Hatred gathered a group of monsters to create the dragon cult. The first thing the cultivators had to do was to cut off the source of its power of wishes. When this side was cleaned up, the president of the Langye Cave School of Law, the enlightened Jimren cultivator, Yunzi, would come and kill him. By that time, everyone would have a share of such a magical power. Who wouldn't be tempted? For these low-level cultivators, it was Yunzi who told them not to tell their fellow Taoists. Even if someone came to ask them, they wouldn't tell them. They were afraid that the credit would be shared by more people. But the cultivators of Daotong were the same as the swordsmen of Kenzo. They were better at fighting. He said that he had to display his supernatural powers to these ordinary people. So he couldn't be too shocking and startle the dragon Yazi. It was indeed a difficult task. Plus, the dragon cult members must have done something wrong. Or in other words, the ignorant people were so stupid. They only said that priest Lu of South Mountain worshipped the dragon prince, and his hair turned from white to black in just a month. And the dragon cult didn't take any money from them. Instead, they often gave them aid. How could there be such a cult in the world? Because of this, from the time the cultivators received the news in the afternoon until the evening, almost everyone's efforts were in vain. The cultivators were patient. But this patience was for cultivation, not for mortals. If it wasn't for Yunzi's strict order not to take anyone's life, some cultivators who hadn't passed the killing tribulation and had an unstable Taoist heart would have already started killing. So some people decided to think of other ways to break up the dragon cult. Perhaps cultivators weren't very good at bewitching people, but fighting and killing people were always better than that. These days, they all knew that the dragon cult had a commanding elder and a young man called the cult master. What a joke! The real cult master was Hatred. Why would the dragon's son appear in the market? It was obvious that he was a puppet. If he killed the puppet and the sect elder, wouldn't the cult disperse in an uproar? At that time, Reverend Yunzi would make his move. Great things would be done. The first people who thought of this plan were a Void Realm cultivator and a Conception Realm cultivator. Chapter 174. These two people were originally fellow cultivators of Zhou Tian Lingbao School, and they came to the secular world together to experience the tribulation. The head of Zhou Tian Lingbao School, Tong Zhouzi, was one of the 5 cultivators who went to the Li State to pursue the Ghost Emperor a month ago. Unfortunately, although this person's cultivation level was high, he had a very rare shortcoming among high-level cultivators. He was stingy. Zhou Tian Lingbao School was also one of the 36 schools of Daotong. Although it wasn't as rich as the Heavenly Cave, it wasn't a poor family either. Even the most inferior school had enough treasures to buy half of the Daqing state. But this head of Tong Zhouzi never gave the famous or precious books of his school to the cultivators to experience the tribulation. When his disciples reached the peak of the intent realm, he would drive them down the mountain, saying that they could only experience the tribulation themselves, so that their cultivation level could be solid. This was not wrong, but the problem was, he didn't even want to use his protective magic treasures and high-level talismans. He would only drive his disciples out of the school and tell them, "The world is full of spirit treasures, look for them carefully." It really fit the name Zhou Tian Lingbao School. The Intent Realm Cultivator's Taoist name was Ziguzi, and the Emptiness Realm Cultivator's Taoist name was Ji Yoshi. He had met Yu Yunzi once in the past, and he had given him some pointers on cultivation, so he owed him a favor. This time, when he got the news, he was the first to rush over. Not because he was sentimental, but because a true realm cultivator like Yunzi couldn't be as stingy as their head. Even if he sent them to do something, and then threw them a talisman, it would be a talisman written by a true realm cultivator. They had never seen such a good thing. It was very sad to talk about it. Therefore, these two people were the ones who put in the most effort in doing this. While the other low-level cultivators were still pondering how to be reserved and amiable to those secular people, these two had already gathered a group of people at a corner of a construction site in the ruins of Taoshi Road. Originally, he didn't intend to say too much, and only use this method to intimidate the other party. Therefore, Tung Qingshan used Ji Yoshi's elementary emptiness realm incantation, Devil Subduing Sutra. It was noon, the sun was scorching, and there was only a slight breeze. A group of people who had been working for half a day surrounded the two of them. The smell was really unpleasant. They frowned and looked at them with vigilant and doubtful eyes. This made the two cultivators feel that they should end this task as soon as possible and calm these people down. Thus Jiyoshi wrote in the air. Although the writing was strenuous and slow, he had indeed forced out spiritual power from his fingertips. With only one finger, without using a magic brush, he had managed to write a true talisman of the character subdue. With Jiyoshi as the center, the area within a few dozen feet of him immediately became quiet. There were cicadas chirping at first, but the chirping was suppressed. The background noise of people working in the distance had also disappeared. The breeze was suppressed as well. At this moment, these two cultivators, along with the 30 to 40 people around them, temporarily severed their fate with this world. However, after Jiyoshi wrote the Devil Subduing Sutra and adjusted his breathing, the people surrounding the two of them finally became impatient. Just now, the self-proclaimed Taoist priest had a solemn expression on his face, as if he had exerted a lot of effort and was about to show off his ability. Because of this, the people even lowered their voices while talking to each other. But now nothing happened. There was no light, no sound, no fireworks, and no little people. The two Taoist priests just stood there in a daze. They didn't say anything and only looked at these people with a rather arrogant expression. Why are they so arrogant? They came to listen to their nonsense in the middle of the day. There was originally some wind, but now there wasn't even a trace of wind. It was so stuffy that it made people panic. Originally, the smell on their bodies was unpleasant, but now it was even worse. Someone asked, "Where's the magic trick?" The two Taoist priests seemed to be offended. They looked at them in disbelief and said, "You fools, you actually didn't." Who could bear to listen to them? They actually called them fools. After holding it in for a long time, they didn't even make a fart. They were also wearing ordinary clothes, but they still pretended to be experts. It was obvious that they were trying to scam some money to scare people. The people started to make sarcastic remarks about the two of them. The noise in the distance was suppressed, but the voices of 30 to 40 people were already considered lively. Who would care about such inconspicuous details? When they were satisfied with their sarcastic remarks, they ridiculed the two of them, and then dispersed. Before Jiyoshi could say, "You actually didn't understand the mysteries of Taoism?" This group of unruly people, fools, they actually said that the deity in the temple could even make the incense and candles spontaneously ignite. They said that was what the real deities would do. However, in his sect, even a child could do that. The more the two of them thought about it, the angrier they got. They almost wanted to kill. But then they remembered Yunzi's warning. Thus, they decided not to talk to these fools again until tomorrow. Originally, when they were cultivating in the blessed heavenly abode, they were surrounded by people of the same noble and pure path. Even those who were greedy and stingy would cover their faces with a veil called etiquette and politeness. Although under this veil, the greed and stinginess of the experts were no different from the greed and stinginess of the ordinary people. Even the prostitutes liked to be glib and knew how to make people happy. How could there be so many people who could really appreciate the so-called true temperament and simplicity? The two cultivators felt that it was terrible to deal with the ordinary people. They were originally high up and looked down on these ordinary people, and they shouldn't have any contact with them. Now they had to mix in. It was like digging into a swamp. Thus they left. They also didn't want to go to the Pill Cauldron sect's residence of the Shangqing sect. It wouldn't be good if Yunzi found out that they didn't do anything during the day, but they also didn't want to go to the wind and moon. Their hearts were indeed filled with impatience. Thus, after walking around the city and calming down a little, they finally felt that something wasn't right. Why did they waste so much effort? Why didn't they just kill the sect leader and the commanding elder? Although they didn't have a way to clearly determine the cultivation level of other people, they knew some details. These cultivators came from the Xianmen sect and were very proud and arrogant. At first, when Yunzi told them to mix in with the crowd, some people, after seeing Lu Laodao, used what they thought was a clever Xianmen sect technique to test him, just to see his cultivation level. The result was very close to the truth. Although Lu Gongzhan's cultivation level was in the emptiness realm, what he cultivated was the Tao of painting. In terms of fighting, he couldn't compare with the cultivators of Daotong and Kenzo. Moreover, he cultivated on his own before, and Li Yunqin probably didn't know many small tricks, let alone him. Thus, the result the cultivators got was that this was a Taoist at the peak of the conception realm, only in terms of fighting strength. Some cautious cultivators went to ask Yunzi if it was true, but the true realm cultivator who gathered them just smiled and didn't say anything. In the end, Taoist Yunzi wouldn't harm his juniors and fellow cultivators. Thus, the cultivators became more and more certain. Thus, when the sun was setting in the west, these two came up with this idea. At that time, they were walking in an alley paved with bluestone, thinking that this idea was indeed feasible. They planned to do it tomorrow. Why not tonight but tomorrow? Because tomorrow, the people on Taoshi Road would go to work. They planned to kill the commanding elder and the sect leader of the dragon cult in front of everyone when those ignorant people went to work tomorrow, so that those ignorant people could see what was the real Taoist technique of immortals. After making up their minds, the two prepared to return to the station. But at night, a dark alley was always a place where accidents happened frequently. After walking a dozen steps, they found that the other end of the alley was blocked. A black horse blocked the exit. A swordsman stood in front of the black horse. He wore black clothes, and his shoulders, elbows, and other easily worn parts were lined with leather, which not only wouldn't be damaged, but also had a protective effect. He wore a bamboo hat. It was unknown how, but the bamboo hat was also black. It was pulled down low, revealing only his firm lips and his broad chin, which looked strong and powerful. He stood in the middle of the road with a black saber in his arms. The moonlight cast a clear glow on the blade. Ziguzi and Jiyoshi looked at each other, stopped, and looked at the person in front of them in surprise. Cultivators might not be able to see the level of other cultivators, but it wasn't difficult to see the level of mortals. Right now, this man with a black saber was going to stop them. Does he want to die? Perhaps it was because they had a belly full of resentment from the secular people during the day that they had nowhere to vent. The two cultivators tacitly stopped talking and stood still. They didn't wave their hands to send him flying, but in some kind of complicated and subtle state of mind, they wanted to listen to what he had to say. The swordsman in black saw the two's movements through the gap of the bamboo hat. Then he squinted his eyes, but he still couldn't see clearly through the gap. So he used the hilt of the saber in his arms to push the bamboo hat upward, and finally saw the surprised expression on the two's faces. This was a result that he was satisfied with. He smiled slightly, revealing a row of snow-white teeth. Under the moonlight, the dark night, and the black clothes, this made him look dangerous and cruel. I am Black Sabering Jurin. There are some things I want to ask you two friends. When the other party heard his name, the expression on his face was still surprised. But he had already calmed down, and only stared at him. This was a very normal reaction. Jianghu people would probably have two reactions when they heard the name Black Sabering Jurin. Those with a high enough status might admire him, or despise him, or gnash their teeth. But they would always know him. As for the small characters, those who had just entered Jianghu and were ignorant, they would probably be like this. They still didn't know who was standing in front of them. A faint smile appeared at the corner of his lips. During the day, I saw the two of you doing things, hee. Your methods weren't very clever. Didn't you use your methods well? The two of you look clean, And the way you speak also seems to be educated. But which temple attendant has lost his job? And you want to earn a bowl of unconventional food. I guess you want to get a share of the profits from the dragon cult. Since those people believe in the so-called dragon prince, they are also idiots. They have become a good target for you. But the two of you, let me give you a piece of advice. You can't afford to eat the dragon cult's food. I'm afraid that if you eat it, you will lose your life. After saying this, the two opposite him seemed to want to laugh. They didn't take his advice to heart at all. But Black Saber Ingjuren wasn't angry. He shook his head. Sigh. Alas, do you know who is behind the dragon cult? You know that it is the Yu family in the city of Wei who is doing things behind the scenes. He is a businessman and deals with the government. He is not a Jianghu person, so he really can't interfere with our Jianghu affairs. But what about the Eagle King Castle? You can't not know, right? 20 years ago, the Eagle King's son Dingheng destroyed the whole Qian family. Since then, the Eagle King Castle has dominated Jianghu. Let me tell you today, the Yu family is still related to the Eagle King Castle. After saying this, Ingjuren stared at the two people. Now that you know all this, I will ask you one more question. Do you want to get rich? Jiyoshi let out a sigh gently. Oh, rich? What kind of rich? Ingjuren snorted. Those followers and believers of the dragon cult are actually people with a hard life. They are bewitched by the cult for a while, and they have given away a lot of their wealth. I have never seen such things in other prefectures. The cult collects money, and then runs away after that. Only the common people suffer. They are all poor people. Why do you want to take advantage of them? In my opinion, we Jianghu people should be open and aboveboard in doing things. You have been mingling with those followers these days, so you should know that the dragon cult has a golden statue. It weighs 16 kilograms and weighs 2 or 3 coins. If you rob the golden statue, hee. First, you can rob the rich and help the poor. Second, the dragon cult can't even guard the golden statue. How can its followers believe it? In a few days, those deceived people will scatter like birds and beasts. But Jiyoshi suddenly interrupted him. Why do you keep an eye on us? How long have you been watching us? Ingjuren slightly raised his head and said proudly, no one can know who I, Ingjuren, want to watch. As for why I watch you, hee. Just think of it as a gift from God to you since you are tired. So you're saying that the two of us are nothing special in your eyes, and it's just a coincidence? Ziguzi added. Hee. Yes. Since you said that we are not worthy of the dragon cult's rice bowl, and talked about the Eagle King fort, why do you want to do this and provoke them? Ingjuren slightly frowned. As a Jianghu person, he realized that these two people were not right. The tone of these two people was calm and unhurried. After hearing about the golden statue that weighed 16 kilograms, they did not look greedy at all. So the two of you are the claws and teeth of the Eagle King Castle. Ingjuren suddenly took off his bamboo hat, tightly gripped his black blade, and shouted out. With such a shout, the black saber tore through the air with a hum, and slashed at the place where the two people were standing. However, the two cultivators only took a slight step back, and the saber was dodged. Black Saber Ingjuren only needed a blink of an eye to understand the situation. The two people were not afraid at all after hearing his name. They deliberately put on a show during the day to lure him into a trap. Now they easily dodged his saber. These two people's martial arts were shockingly high, and their thoughts were shockingly deep. He shouted again, "Let's go together. Let's fight them to death." As soon as he finished speaking, an old man walked out from behind the black horse. He was also dressed in black, and held a black saber. However, after hesitating for a while, he said, "Hero Ing, I remember you told me that this path of 7 killings is the path of advancing courageously alone." Ingjuren frowned and said in a low voice, "Humph, these claws of the Eagle King fort. Don't talk about Jianghu morality with them. Let's go together." Advancing courageously. The path of advancing courageously alone. This body, your body and mine, all belong to the Jianghu's righteous path. We are also advancing courageously alone. There is no other Jianghu righteous path. Chapter 175. The old man thought about his words for a bit, not sure if he was convinced or not. But in the end, he still raised his blade and introduced himself with a hoarse voice. I'm Mang Killer Fiend Meng Ao. My blade doesn't kill nameless people. Who are you? Tell me your name. Now that things had developed to this point, it was no longer interesting for the two cultivators. Originally, they only thought he was a fun guy to play around with. But now that the situation had turned into a cliché of fighting and killing, the cultivators didn't have the mood to spar with the people of Jianghu. And they didn't want to waste any more words with this man Killer Fiend Meng Ao. Ziguzi casually took out a talisman from his sleeve, flicked his wrist, and threw it out. Then he quickly walked towards Black Blading Juran and Man Killer Fiend Meng Ao, extending his hand. As soon as the talisman was used, the two Jianghu cultivators felt a sudden sense of weakness, silently cursing in their hearts. This wasn't a feeling of weakness from a fierce battle, nor was it a feeling of physical exhaustion from hard work. At that time, there was still a bit of qi left in their hearts. Even if their bodies were tired, their hearts still wanted to persevere. But right now, the feeling they were feeling right now was a feeling of powerlessness on a fine spring night, or the feeling of lying on a bamboo bed by the window listening to the sound of falling flowers. Their bodies didn't want to move, and their hearts didn't want to move either. They didn't even want to hold their blades. A talisman that could be easily written by an emptiness realm cultivator instantly subdued the two Jianghu cultivators. Ziguzi walked in front of them and stretched out his hands, grabbing them by the neck like he was grabbing chickens. He easily lifted them into the air and shook them violently. Clink, 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 clink. Blades, daggers, darts, hooks, iron spikes, hemp ropes, cow tendon ropes, copper coins, silver and gold leaves. Everything was shaken out and fell to the ground. Then the cultivator pressed their bodies a few times and threw them to the ground. To mortals, spirit energy that was even more tyrannical than the most profound inner energy sealed their acupuncture points. Other than their eyes and mouth, they couldn't move anywhere else. At this time, Jiyoshi, who was coldly watching from behind, spoke. Black Blading Juran. Man Killer Fiend Meng Ao. What is your status in the mortal Jianghu? Juran now knew what kind of person he was up against. Legend had it that only the most unlucky and ignorant martial artists in the world of martial artists in the wild, or on the road, could provoke them once every 10 years or so cultivators. However, this was his second time this year. Although the tiredness in his body had not faded and his acupuncture points had been forcefully sealed, he still did his best to speak. I am very famous near the city of Wei. Oh, normal Jianghu people will give me face. In the Qing kingdom, in the southeast, it is also quite. Just now you said that if we steal the dragon cult's golden statue, the followers will scatter like birds and beasts. Are you sure? Jiyoshi asked again. I am sure. Huh. Juran widened his eyes in surprise. Aren't the two deities? Why are you so sure? The other party didn't care about his question. After exchanging a few words with Ziguzi, he asked again. As if he was just a letter that could talk. Juran wasn't angry at this kind of disdain. In fact, anyone who could easily make a second-rate, almost first-rate willing master lose his ability to fight was enough to erase all other emotions from his heart. He just wanted to have the chance to obtain such a method. So he continued. Because those followers are actually doing this for. He repeated it many times, but couldn't finish his sentence. In the end, he couldn't even stutter clearly, and his face turned purple. Only now did Ziguzi realize that even though he'd tried his best to reduce his strength, so that he wouldn't directly kill the two, spiritual energy was still too domineering for a secular practitioner. He snorted coldly, and lightly stomped his foot on the ground, sending 2 stones flying. With another kick, the stones shot out and unsealed the two's acupoints. Juran's speech finally became clear. But he didn't hurry to stand up, and only finished his words. Those followers aren't devout or anything. They're just doing it for their own benefits. If we steal the golden statue, they'll soon realize. He tried his best to articulate his words, and found that the two cultivators were starting to think about something. Their expressions were calm and cold, and they almost never looked at him or Meng Ao. Because of this, Juran knew that this wasn't a good sign. These people really didn't hold back when they killed. He lightly nudged Meng Ao. who was standing beside him without saying a word. The old man understood that heroing meant to wait for the right time. If things go south, we'll immediately attack. Then Ingjuren thought for a while and said, "Just now I had eyes but failed to recognize MT Tai, and unintentionally offended the two Sendo. But I've seen a Sendo in Weiqing City before. That was at the Chow family's house." As he spoke, he observed the two cultivators' expressions. He found that their eyes lit up and turned to look at him at the same time. He let out a sigh of relief and organized his words more concise and concise. "That loyal servant was the man-killer fiend, Meng Ao, who was by my side. Because at that time, Taoist Li Yunxin's martial arts were extremely high. I paid attention to his news. Later, I found out that another Taoist Ling Kong came to Weiqing City, and the two were good friends. The two Sendo are also immortals, and are now also in Weiqing City, so they should be close friends with Taoist Ling Kong. Then, you probably know about that Taoist Li Yunxin." When Ingjuren said this, his tone was completely devoid of the usual Jianghu atmosphere, which made the two cultivators slightly surprised. This person doesn't seem to be a completely uncivilized person, but what they cared about was not this detail, but the Taoist Li Yunxin, in Ingjuren's words. When he finally finished telling them what he knew, Ji Yoshi and Ziguzi looked at each other and frowned slightly. "That day you saw that Li Yunxin in the Qiao family's house, so you paid attention to him." Ji Yoshi thought about what Ingjuren said and asked him slowly and carefully. "So in the following days, I tried to find out more. I thought he was a hidden master, but later I found out that he was a cultivator. Because you paid attention to him and inquired about him, you knew that he spoke in a strange way." How strange. Ingjuren suddenly realized that he had made the second mistake tonight. These two cultivators, and that Li Yunxin, were not the same kind of people. But for the people in the secular world, they couldn't be blamed for making this kind of mistake. Just like how the common people in the market all thought that the officials in the capital were protecting each other and working together to support the emperor. Knowledgeable people naturally knew that this was not the case. There was strife in the officialdom, and the emperor was not supreme. However, on the issue of Xianmen and immortals, the most knowledgeable people in the secular world were not much better than the ignorant people in the view of the officials in the capital. Not to mention him. But at this moment, Ji Yoshi's eyes were full of seriousness and curiosity, so he had to answer. Ingjuren took a deep breath. "This is strange. That is to say, the way he speaks is very unique. He likes to say a few strange words, curse words. It is said that he likes to curse people, and has a bad temper. These are all words that no one has ever heard. For example, words like retarded, retard, psychopath, and so on. You also said that a friend of yours saw Li Yunxin again a few days ago. Then you saw him again in the past few days. Neither your friend nor you realized that this Li Yunxin is different from the previous one. Does this mean?" Ji Yoshi leaned forward slightly, staring at Ingjuren. "The current Li Yunxin and the Li Yunxin you saw in the Qiao family's yard are still the same person? Because of the way he speaks, you can't find another person in the world? Think carefully before you answer me." There was nothing he couldn't think clearly about. The only thing he didn't know was how the other party would react after answering him. Ingjuren's brain was working very fast, but finally, he still couldn't think of a good way. So he could only secretly raise his breath, ready to turn around later. He said in a low voice, "Yes. It should be the same person." Ji Yoshi immediately straightened his body and turned to Ziguzi. "Something went wrong with my master. Li Yunxin didn't die. Things are different from what we thought." At that time, Fairy Ling Kong said that Li Yunxin was a Taoist painter who could make treasured scrolls. This kind of person is now the leader of the dragon cult. This dragon cult is not as simple as my master thought. Ziguzi also frowned. Qi Wen hatred Lord Dongting. These things may be different from what we thought. This news is. The two cultivators looked at each other. The next moment, a smile suddenly appeared on their faces. Amazing! They weren't nervous at all. Not even a little bit. They thought they had the ability to do so. A true state cultivator. 36 wills and emptiness state cultivators gathered in the city of Wei. With such a magnificent lineup, they could flatten the Wei River Prefecture within 3 months. Even if something went wrong, it would mean that it would be the work of the two of them, and not a crisis. The young man we met during the day is Li Yunxin, Taoist painter. I heard from the senior cultivators that he's not good at fighting. No, it's because of Taoist painter. What do you mean? We are good at meeting enemies on a narrow path, and that Taoist painter is good at planning. Li Yunxin must be prepared. We can't be careless. Taoist painter is also a cultivator. It's good to be cautious. Alas, that's true. But Taoist painter doesn't have any inheritance. He can't be that good. Unfortunately, we don't have any good treasures. If there is, that's true. If there is any treasure, alas, if we capture that Li Yunxin, it will be a great achievement. The two of them spoke very quickly, and in the blink of an eye, they had said so much, leaving Ingjuren and Meng Ao aside. The two Jianghu experts looked at each other in the dark alley, wishing they could plug their ears. Although they didn't understand, they knew that they were talking about the secrets of the cultivation world. If they heard it, how could they let them go? In the end, Jiyoshi sighed. Speaking of treasures, alas, last year, during the Heaven Sovereign's Christmas, I went to the Kongyan sect. Do you remember Taoist Red Clouds, one of the 3 disciples of the Kongyan sect? His cultivation of wills and Tao were really mediocre. However, he hid a rui in his sleeve, and once he took it out, it shone brightly, and all the evil ghosts avoided it. So I asked him, what do you think? That rui, as long as you're a direct disciple of the Kongyan sect, you'll have it. I'm really envious. Ziguzi also sighed with him, but then shook his head. Brother, you don't have to be envious of them. Let's talk about the Dragon Son's hatred. Dragon Son. Once he's killed, the dragon horns, dragon scales, dragon tendons, and dragon souls are all treasures. Our master is a generous person, so we can't miss out on some benefits. As for that Li Yunxin, TSK, if we catch him and ask him to paint a few scrolls for us, our master probably won't say anything. That's right. But let's talk about this tomorrow. Jiyoshi stopped talking, glanced at Ingjuren and Meng Ao, and suddenly thought of something. Maybe it was because he was in a good mood because he had just obtained an extraordinary skill. So he asked, from what you said just now, it seems like you have a grudge against the Yu residents and the Eagle King Castle. But why did you come to the city of Wei to provoke the dragon cult? Ingjuren hesitated for a while, and then said in a deep voice, I want to help my friend get revenge. Jiyoshi thought this was a boring reason. TSK, you would also do this kind of thing? What friend? After finishing his words, he was about to leave. The 2 Jianghu masters thought that they had heard a secret, so the other party would definitely kill them. But in the minds of the cultivators, there was no need for that. Although killing them was just a matter of moving a finger, there was a sin of killing, and if someone found an excuse to kill indiscriminately in the future, it would not be worth it. They had all heard about the incident where Fairy Ling Kong killed Pun Nanzi. It was like brushing the ants on the table onto the ground, because they didn't want to dirty their fingers, instead of crushing them to death. One talisman could make these 2 people sleep for half a month, and then everything would be fine. After all, they were just 2 people from the secular world. In the eyes of the cultivators, they were just people. But after asking this casually, and taking 2 steps forward, there was no reply. Jiyoshi turned around and took a glance. If he was too scared to speak, injured, or thinking about how to answer, Jiyoshi would continue to walk. He just asked casually, and didn't care about the answer. But all he saw was that Ingjuren sitting in a dark corner, with only his pale chin exposed. His lips were tightly pressed into a line. He still didn't want to answer. You don't know what's good for you. Jiyoshi raised his hand. Since he didn't want to answer, he didn't want to hear it either. It was easy and fast to switch between one thought and another. Just now, he was afraid of some trouble, and didn't want to kill him. But at this moment, because the other didn't want to answer, he suddenly felt a little unhappy, and then he realized that there was actually a reason to kill him. Not wanting to dirty his hands, brushing the ants off the table, and thinking about something else, he casually crushed the ants to death. For an ant, This was a matter of life and death. But for a human, it wasn't even a big deal. A blue light appeared on his fingertip. Li Yunxin could release spirit energy to shatter an emptiness realm cultivator's ocean of qi. An emptiness realm cultivator could also release a bit of spirit energy that was almost non-existent to cultivators, but deadly to mortals. When Ing Juran saw the green light, he subconsciously raised his hand, as if he wanted to block it. Man-killer fiend Meng Ao also saw the blue light and stood up, as if wanting to jump in front of Ing Juran. But then he heard a frivolous voice. I suddenly feel like this person isn't bad. What do you guys think? Followed by a sickly sweet voice. Whatever the great king says, it must be true, followed by a soft voice. He, that old man, oh my great king, that old man from House Chiao. Before Ing Juran and Meng Ao could figure out what was going on, Ziguzi and Ji Yoshi were already alerted. They didn't notice that there was someone hiding nearby. Several talismans appeared in their hands. Layers and layers of light flashed on their bodies. Then Ziguzi stood guard in front, while Ji Yoshi held a talisman at the back, leaning against the wall with a yellow talisman on it, and shouted, Who are you? A second later, the experts appeared. A white-clothed young man sat on the wall on one side of the alley, one leg on the wall, the other dangling down. He held a tears bamboo fan in his hand, smiling faintly. He wasn't looking at the two of them, but at Ing Juran and Meng Ao. A black-clothed girl with a pretty face sat beside him, her legs slanted to one side. She lightly hammered his shoulders with her delicate fists. There were 3 other men standing on the wall, next to the black-clothed girl. They were well-behaved and didn't speak. Their faces were shrouded in darkness, and couldn't be seen clearly. There seemed to be another figure further away. But that person must have cast some kind of spell. In fact, these people had been sitting or standing on the wall, looking at what happened just now. Now that they had revealed themselves, they no longer concealed their presence. Ji Yoshi and Ziguzi looked at each other, and their expressions didn't look good. Because at this moment in the alley, demon aura soared to the sky. It was the leader of the dragon cult, Li Yunxin. The 2 Daotong cultivators were still thinking about what this sudden incident meant, and whether they could escape unscathed from the siege of the demons. On the other side, Li Yunxin spoke to Black Blade Ing Juran. So you're my fan. Then let me ask you, who are you avenging? Ing Juran had 100 things he couldn't understand, but he only knew one thing. The people on the wall were extremely arrogant. Looking at the 2 cultivators' reactions, he realized that this group of people was ridiculously strong. He didn't need to think about anything else. He knew that only these people with demonic auras could save him and Meng Ao today. But even so, he was still stunned, and didn't answer immediately. Li Yunxin wasn't angry, and only looked at him with interest. What, you still don't want to say? Ing Juran took a deep breath. Sindo's magic power is strong, but he doesn't know about the affairs of the Jianghu. That person. If the information is leaked. Enough. Li Yunxin raised his fan and interrupted him, as if he didn't care about the answer. He pointed at Ing Juran and Meng Ao, then turned to Ji Yoshi and Ziguzi. I'll protect these 2. Chapter 176. Ji Yoshi and Ziguzi didn't quite understand what uncovered meant. But cultivators knew other cultivators best, and they knew demons best. Therefore, they knew that the other party didn't care whether they could understand the meaning of the words, just like they didn't care about what the 2 secular people said. However, judging from the tone and expression of the other party, they could roughly figure out what the 3 words were trying to convey. These demons and that Taoist priest Danqing, Li Yunxin, were very bold. Now that immortal Yunzi was in the city of Wei, and there were dozens of cultivators in the city, they dared to show up so openly. After having such a thought, the 2 cultivators felt a little calmer, and felt ashamed of their panic just now. Appearing at this time and in this way, it seemed that the other party just wanted to convey an attitude, or send a signal. The whole city of Wei was under the control of Daotong. If the 2 of them really fought fiercely here, the delicate balance in the city would be broken. However, after all, the other party had more people, and they didn't know the means of Taoist priest Danqing. Therefore, After a little relief, Jiyoshi saluted to Li Yunxin with a cold face. Li, I didn't expect that you didn't die, but Taoist priest Danqing is also a cultivator, and he cultivates the way of the heavenly heart. Why are you with demons? Li Yunxin stared at him for a while, and then looked at Ziguzi. Then, while pointing at the two with his fan, he turned to the demons beside him and said, Sheriff, Shanji is now in the emptiness realm. Shuk Siji and intent realm. The speed of your cultivation is already inconceivable for human cultivators. But when it comes to fighting, whether you can win or not, the realm is only one aspect. Experience, Taoist magic, equipment, mentality, courage, and so on are all very important. Now the two below, one is in the emptiness realm, and the other is in the intent realm, and their realms are almost the same as yours. However, they are more skilled than you in Taoism, and have more fighting experience than you, so you are probably not their match. Don't be dissatisfied, Shanji. Li Yunxin's attitude infuriated Jiyoshi and Ziguzi. Li Yunxin's disdain was different from the disdain of those ignorant mortals. This disdain came from a fellow cultivator. In fact, it couldn't even be considered contempt. It was disregard. However, they were not Ingjurin or Meng Ao. He did not think that the other party was much more brilliant than him. Although Taoist priests in painting were rare, it wasn't unheard of. Some heavenly caves and sects would worship them. In the eyes of the cultivators of Daotong and Kenzo, Taoist Danqing was not a very orthodox cultivator. In other words, it was a simplified version of a cultivator. They only cultivated realms, not Taoist magic. Previously, Jiyoshi reminded Ziguzi to be careful of Taoist, Danqing Li Yunxin's means. Even without Taoist magic, Taoist Danqing's painting scrolls and formations were very troublesome. However, this cautious thought was overwhelmed by the disdain they suffered. The two Taoists who had only gone through the love tribulations were irritated. They thought that even if they were not as good as the others and could not defeat the demons, they needed to let them know that the cultivators of Daotong were not ants that could be crushed easily. They were not ordinary mortals. However, Jiyoshi was more determined, while Ziguzi was a little hesitant. He was in the realm of conception. However, according to Li Yunxin's tone, the two with the lowest cultivation were also in the realm of conception. He was afraid that he would suffer a more troublesome injury, which would affect his future cultivation. Therefore he stopped them. After all, they have the advantage in numbers. Senior brother, we'd better lie low for a while. Don't you realize what kind of situation we are in today? But Jiyoshi looked at him seriously. The dragon cult has a plan in the city. Now that they know that we may take action, they came to do something. So someone came and did something. A warning and ultimatum. If the two of us show weakness, and let them do whatever they want, not only will we lose face for Daotong and our master, but we will also be ridiculed by them tonight. Only by letting them know that we are not to be trifled with can we gain respect. Respect comes from power. Ziguzi had to admit that Jiyoshi's words were very reasonable. In fact, they were indeed very reasonable. Therefore, he did not say anything more and let Jiyoshi speak loudly. At first, I thought that the hierarch of the dragon cult was just a puppet. But now I know from the two that it is Taoist Danqing Li Yunxin. You are not dead. Since you are not dead, I don't want to ask you how you survived. But you have to think twice. Demons are after all different species. If you have difficulties, you may be forgiven by Daotong after the matter in the city of Wei is over. But the premise is, Li, you can be forced by the demons, but you can't be the accomplice of the evildoer. Li Yunxin heard his words and felt that Jiyoshi's words were beautiful. Not only did he make his position clear, but he also gave himself a way out. Therefore, he glanced at the chicken spirit and shook his head with a smile. Are you really not convinced? Fine. I have spoiled you before. You still don't know how dangerous the Jianghu is. Then go and have fun. You can choose one of them and defeat either of them. When this matter is over, you will be in charge of the Liuhe prefecture. At least I didn't give you this name for nothing. When a man in colorful clothes beside him heard this, he immediately cheered and jumped into the alley. Jiyoshi angrily widened his eyes. Does Li really want to humiliate us like this? Li Yunxin didn't pay any attention to him. The emptiness boundary Taoist shouted again. Even if we have to fight, it shouldn't be this demon, you should do it yourself. The black-clothed woman on top of the wall seemed to have heard a joke and suddenly laughed. Her slender and soft waist bent like a weeping willow. She leaned on Li Yunxin and said coquettishly, "My king, look at that idiot's stupid words." Li Yunxin only smiled, "Be careful." When the chicken spirit heard this, it pounced toward the two cultivators without any fear of death. This caused Jiyoshi and Ziguzi to be stunned. This demon didn't have any magic weapon, didn't make any hand seals, and didn't use any Taoist techniques. It only used its body to attack. Was it a strategy to lure the enemy, or some other unique skill? Jiyoshi only had time to glance at Li Yunxin on top of the wall before the strong wind, created by the demon's attack, arrived. Although Ingjuren and Meng Ao were still slightly worried about their own fate, they couldn't help but cheer in their hearts when they saw this scene. What a brilliant kung fu! The distance of more than 10 steps was covered by the man called Pheasant in an instant. His hands bent into claws in midair, and the strong wind created by the claws could be felt even from where they were. According to their experience in martial arts, they didn't doubt that this pheasant could tear a hard rock apart with one claw. It wasn't an exaggeration. Because he couldn't figure out the demon's mind, cultivator Jiyoshi chose a safer method. He used a magic brush and wrote a talisman in midair. When a cultivator wrote a talisman, a barrier of 3 steps appeared in front of him. Although the barrier was related to the cultivator's cultivation level, it was, after all, created according to the laws of heaven and earth, so its defensive power couldn't be underestimated. Once this restriction was formed, it immediately took effect. The chicken spirit that was tearing through the air crashed into the invisible barrier with a bang, and was immediately knocked back 4 or 5 steps. At the same time, the talisman that Jiyoshi used also took effect. The shadow formed by the moonlight in the alley seemed to have a life of its own and quickly changed shape, stinging the pheasant that fell to the ground. This time, he immediately lost his human form and was beaten back to his original form. Ingjuren and Meng Ao were stunned. Such a terrifying attack was repelled in midair. Moreover, he turned into a chicken. Jiyoshi and Ziguzi were also stunned. They really didn't expect that this demon would really attack them with only his body. What was he trying to do? He turned around to look at Li Yunxin. He found that Li Yunxin was also looking at them. His eyes weren't friendly. Actually, they weren't friendly at all. "Are you crazy?" Li Yunxin glared and said to Jiyoshi, as if he had just suffered a great injury and felt wronged, "You beat him back to his original form." Jiyoshi and Ziguzi looked at each other and frowned, feeling a bit confused. They didn't really understand what this Li Yunxin was trying to do. He was actually purposely making those demons come here to die one by one. Was there really a reason behind it? Or, Jiyoshi spoke in a low voice, "What does Li mean? Against a demon? Do you still want me to be merciful? Furthermore, you were the one who wanted that demon to jump down and fight us." The red-crowned rooster circled around the ground a few times, then found a direction and jumped onto the wall. Li Yunxin silently stared at him for a while. Then he suddenly didn't seem angry anymore and laughed. "So you really didn't understand the situation? You stinky Taoists, so annoying. Yunzi is too smart, you're too stupid. Can't you compromise? That would save me a lot of effort," Li Yunxin sighed. "Fine, then I'll tell you the current situation. Tonight, you two were unlucky to run into this Black Blade and the man-killer fiend. So you knew that I wasn't dead," Li Yunxin shrugged. "Do you know what this means?" "Li, just say it," Jiyoshi spoke in a low voice. "Why beat around the bush?" Li Yunxin helplessly rubbed his forehead. "Me? Look at me, I'm the one standing in front of you right now. I survived the battle between Long Sun and Ling Kongzi, and a profound realm demon. Both of you know that Long Zichen is dead, right? You also think that the peak of transcendent realm Ling Kongzi is dead, right? You also know that the one who killed Ling Kongzi was a profound realm demon. Even though I was surrounded by 3 terrifying people, I still managed to survive. Do you understand now?" Jiyoshi and Ziguzi exchanged glances and frowned. Li Yunxin finally gave up. He shrugged. "Fine, friend. This means that I have a big secret. My identity is also a big secret. A secret that even your Taoist Yunzi doesn't know about. Now that you know about this secret, do you still think I'll let you walk out of this alley alive? What I'm curious about is why you don't understand this. He pointed at Ji Yoshi and Zi Guzi resentfully. If I know that I'm going to die, and the villain doesn't want to kill me for the time being, but sends a small fry to play with me, I'll definitely work with that small fry to buy time. You know, countless villains die because they talk too much. I'll try to find an opportunity, and even try to make the villain think that I'm interesting, so that I can survive. But you just beat my Red Dragon ambassador back to his original form. So let me ask you, friend, are you crazy? You don't want to live? Hearing the words of this Taoist priest, named Li Yunxin, Ji Yoshi and Zi Guzi finally realized that they were not facing a normal cultivator. This man was a lunatic. Moreover, he was an extremely arrogant and egotistical lunatic. It was reasonable for him to surround them in the alley and ridicule them. It was also reasonable for him to ask his minions to provoke them. It was even reasonable to break their hands and feet, and let those monsters humiliate them. But now, he was talking to them with an attitude of, you should be obedient and begging for mercy, but now you're not obedient and sensible enough. Ji Yoshi was furious in his heart, and the magic brush in his hand suddenly glowed with a misty green light. He took a step forward and widened his eyes, saying, You don't think that your Taoist master will avenge you in the future. Li Yunxin waited for his anger to brew, then looked down at him coldly and interrupted him. Now you think that I'm unreasonable and arrogant, and you're angry that you want to fight me even if you have to die. Although cultivators cherish their lives very much, the two of you are in a low state, and you don't know what it means to cherish your lives. As he spoke, he stood up and put away his previous arrogant and frivolous attitude. This is the result I want. You're extremely angry. Because only when a person with extreme anger dies will his obsession be extremely strong, and he will remember the things that happened before his death deeply. But after all, there is still a little hope in your hearts. This hope comes from my own funeral. What else do you think Yunzi will do? Now let me tell you, the reason why I killed the two of you in this alley tonight, and didn't worry that Yunzi would destroy the dragon cult out of anger, is because, under the two cultivators' shocked and incredulous gazes, Li Yunxin smiled cruelly, and added the last sentence. He asked me to do this. I kill the 36 cultivators, and he will get the power that Daotong gave him. I live and he benefits. Welcome to the real world. Kill them. Such words set off a monstrous wave in the hearts of the two cultivators. The shock made them unable to calm down and think about whether what the other said was true or false. Ji Yoshi's eyes twitched, and he quickly blinked a few times. Suddenly, he shouted at Li Yunxin furiously, Even if I die, I'll drag you to the grave with me. Take this move of mine. He finally decided to attack this Taoist priest. Before he died, even if he couldn't kill him, he would at least leave a wound on him. However, the man in white standing coldly in the darkness on top of the wall didn't move. He just slightly bent his finger. For some reason, it reminded Ji Yoshi and Zi Guzi of the way they killed the two Jianghu people. The two cultivators felt their hearts plummet. It was as if the alley had suddenly been separated from the world, and the few monsters standing on the wall, and that Li Yunxin, seemed to have gone far away. The people and events in this alley were temporarily cut off from this world. Just like what they did during the day, just stronger. Then, they heard someone talking in the darkness on the other side of the alley. The voice was sharp and weird, making people's hair stand on end. Ah, you guys. Hee, you're not qualified to be killed by the king. Humph, how dare you? Kneel down when you see me. Hee, I'll play with you. They saw a fiery red figure walking out from the darkness. Flames suddenly appeared. Chapter 177. The flame lit up the alley. The light itself turned into a substance like water or mist. Because of the law of insulation fruit, it only existed in the alley, and didn't spread out at all. This made the person in the flame clearer and more dazzling. At first, the two cultivators thought it was a female general with a red helmet and red armor. Flames that appeared out of thin air surrounded her feet, spiraling and blooming on the ground, like a flaming dress. The flame licked the ground and the wall, and the steam made the air hot and twisted. The female general had a pair of fiery red eyes, and her pupils were like thin black lines. This meant she was a dragon's. A terrible and ominous premonition suddenly rose in the two cultivators' hearts. Because of this fear and surprise, they finally saw the armor on the female general clearly. It seemed to be more than just an armor. The red hard armor only protected the dragon lady's head, chest, hips, arms, shoulders, and elbows. The other parts, the cultivators originally thought the gray color was the inner lining. But now they realized that it was actually covered with a large number of scales growing out of her body. The shape of the armor was strange, and they had never seen it before. But the two huge, ferocious-looking arm shields with sharp blades on the elbows left a deep impression on them. Now the hands of the dragons were also burning with flames, and the 5 fingers and palms turned almost transparent red in the flame. This didn't match her sharp and demonic voice. But the cultivators didn't have the mood to judge the other's appearance, voice, or even eyes. Ziguzi stared at the dragon lady who walked out of the flame with a terrible momentum, and felt his fingertips trembling slightly. And he said to his senior brother with the same trembling voice, Z. Jiyoshi let out a sigh and clenched his teeth. He knew that the one in front of him might be hatred. The dragons that appeared in the city of Wei. Besides hatred, who else could it be? But he didn't expect that hatred's avatar was actually a woman. Now the woman stopped 5 steps away from the two of them. She was slightly taller than the two cultivators. So she looked down at them, and the light of the fire threw dancing shadows on her face. When she spoke again, her voice was still shrill, but his tone became slower, languid, and deep. This made her sound like a little girl who was full of malice, and was staring at the 2 little toys with cruel curiosity. She was dangerous and unpredictable. Oh, I've waited for so long. As she sighed with emotion, she stood in front of 2 cultivators in the alley, with her back to Li Yunxin and the 4 demons on top of the wall. Therefore, only Jiyoshi and Ziguzi could see that she was rolling her eyes strangely. One of her eyes was staring at the 2 cultivators, and the other was tilted to the side. He seemed to be looking at the people on the wall. Naturally, she could not see the people behind her through her own head. Therefore, this strange scene only lasted for a very, very short moment. It was so short that the 2 people who were about to die wondered if it was an illusion, because of the fire and the shadow. At this moment, Jiyoshi and Ziguzi suddenly realized something else. If the dragons in front of them were hatred, that Li Yunxin could actually tell her to kill them, in such a casual but obviously condescending tone. Who was he? Jiyoshi suddenly turned to Li Yunxin and frowned. You. But because of his movement, the pupils of the dragon lady suddenly shrank, as if she was extremely afraid of him talking to Li Yunxin again. Just after he said that word, the dragon lady spat out a rare short but clear word. Die. Then, just like the chicken spirit just now, with a fierce momentum, with overwhelming flames and extremely high heat, she fiercely pounced over. Zhanchen natal essence. Jiyoshi shouted to Ziguzi in a low voice. His hand did not stop moving. 2 golden characters had already been sketched out by the magic brush in an instant, even before he had finished speaking. Hold on. You hold them off, I will go. Ziguzi spoke almost at the same time, and his figure suddenly became blurred. The 2 said different things and did different things, but their purpose was the same. Previously, they only knew about Li Yunxin and thought it was a miraculous achievement. They wanted to go back and tell Yunzi about it in exchange for some benefits. Because in their view, whether Li Yunxin was dead or alive, it did not matter to the big picture. A true state cultivator could solve a lot of problems. However, what they saw now was Yazi. If Dragon Sun wanted to kill them in the city of Wei, even a stupid guy would know that the situation must have changed greatly. Cultivators did not take emotions seriously, but after all, they only took the emotions of cultivators and mortals lightly. Among the cultivators, especially the low-level cultivators like Jiyoshi and Ziguzi, who had only gone through the love and hatred trial, there were many who had deep relationships. The two had been together for a long time, and they had a tacit understanding. They were not very afraid of Li Yunxin before, because Taoist Danqing was also a Taoist, and they had some vague understanding. But now it was Dragon Lady who was going to kill them. Hatred was notorious, and even though he was in trouble, he was still a person that could not be underestimated in the hearts of cultivators. Li Yunxin said that their death was because of their teacher, and although they were surprised, they still had doubts in their hearts. However, now that he saw the Dragon Lady, he felt that what the sinister young man had said might very well be true. So if that was the case, they could not die like this. They had to find out if it was true. If it was true, they had to tell the news to Daotong even if they had to risk their lives. If it was not true, hatred showed up tonight to kill people. They had to tell the Daotong Immortal about this. Therefore, the two of them made the most rational decision at the same time. Ji Yoshi, who had the cultivation of emptiness realm, used the 3 steps barrier formed when he wrote the talismans to stop Dragon Lady. As long as he could stop her for 1 or 2 breaths, Ziguzi, who was better at the art of escaping, could escape. By then, Ji Yoshi would die, and Ziguzi would find out the truth. It was better than both of them dying here without knowing anything. In this split second, the 2 talismans written by Ji Yoshi were taken out. The 3 steps barrier formed in front of him, and it immediately collided with the flame and high temperature, emitting a brilliant golden light. Ziguzi's figure gradually became transparent. Before he was about to escape, he couldn't help but turn his head and look at his martial brother. He decided to remember this last moment. In the future, no matter where he went, he would never forget this deep hatred. He must, however, the last person he saw was not his martial brother, Ji Yoshi. The golden light in front of the cultivator rose, but the Dragon Lady was not blocked or bounced back like the chicken spirit. In front of her flame, the barrier was like a brittle paper that had been exposed to the sun for a long time, breaking into rays of golden light upon contact. Dragon Lady went straight to within 3 steps of the cultivator, as if she was in an uninhabited place. Ji Yoshi's Zhenanshan talismans didn't show any effect. He didn't even have the time to wonder why the Dragon Lady was not blocked by the barrier, before his head was smashed by a palm. Therefore, what Ziguzi saw was the flesh, bones, brains, and blood turning into green smoke in the raging flame. Before he could figure out why the Dragon Lady had instantly killed his Void Realm Taoist brother, he had also smashed his head into pieces with a similar palm strike. At this time, the echo of the word die that Dragon Lady said in the alley had completely dissipated. Everything was done with one palm. The flame suddenly dissipated. Dragon Lady turned around and exhaled. Ha! She seemed to be dissatisfied that the 2 cultivators were killed so easily. Li Yunxin jumped down from the top of the wall. As soon as he landed, he threw out an iron chain from his sleeve and locked the souls of the 2 cultivators. After locking the souls, he looked at the other end of the alley. A moment later, a black shadow approached from afar. It seemed that it only took 2 or 3 steps to cross the alley and reach the 2 souls. But it couldn't go any further. The array that Li Yunxin set up had not dissipated yet. The black shadow could only keep walking, but it was still in the same place. This was probably the doppelganger puppet that the White Hell King had mentioned. Some of the names of the mortals were written in the Book of Life and Death. Li Yunxin, the great demon, had to personally collect them. And these 2 cultivators who didn't care about the mortals were collected by such a puppet. At least in Black by Yanjun's world, they were unimportant dust particles. Li Yunxin retracted the iron chain and pulled the 2 souls into his white paper fan. Then he looked at the clone of the Black Yama King. He realized that the clone puppet wasn't going in this direction. After looking around for a moment, he suddenly transformed into a burst of azure light and disappeared. So that's how it works. Li Yunxin muttered to himself. Some people died because of some coincidences, such as special weather, yin and yang clashing, or simply because they died in a place where yang qi was extremely abundant. Just like today, they happened to be able to hide from the puppet clone, and became a lonely ghost that lingered in this world, unable to leave. He looked at Sanhua, who was rubbing his hands to get rid of the dirt. After a moment of silence, he waved his hand. Come down. When the three demons and the chicken jumped into the alley, Li Yunxin looked outside the wall and said, I didn't expect you to win against those two cultivators. The reason I brought you all here is to train the soldiers. Now that you're following me, you're fooling the mortals every day and living happily. But you must know that not all the demons in this world are so happy. In the outside world, if you meet a Taoist priest like Ziguzi or Zhiyuzi with your cultivation, they will kill you without hesitation. The difference in cultivation isn't that big, but they have magic tools and talismans. They also have a set of experiences passed down by Daotong for thousands of years. Although you're stronger than the demons who can't learn Taoism, there's still a limit. Because no matter what, actual combat and experience are the most important things. He rarely spoke in such a serious tone. The three demons stood obediently, and even the chicken spirit, who had been beaten back to its original form, listened quietly. Dragon Lady stood next to them, rubbing her hands nervously as she looked at them. Her eyes kept darting around, making people worry that they might fall out. She seemed to be getting used to her new body, which made her look a little strange. Li Yunxin paused, then pointed at the chicken. But I didn't expect to be talking about you. Are you an idiot? The chicken didn't move, but it knew that Li Yunxin was really going to get angry. There was no anger on his face, and his tone was calm. But in the past, he had always talked to them as if they were pets. Never so harshly. Are you an idiot? When I was lecturing you, I told you to be more careful when you meet people. You really dared to get close to them just now. If it wasn't for the fact that the Taoist priest was even more stupid, thinking that you wouldn't be so stupid as to come to your death, I would have stewed you and eaten you. The cat demon laughed. Li Yunxin ignored her and paced around with his hands behind his back. You're not convinced. You said she rushed over like that too? He turned around and looked at the dragon lady, who was possessed by the three flowers, and pointed. First, her body doesn't have any fate with this world, so the three-step barrier doesn't work on her. Second, that palm she used. You see, it was just a simple palm. A palm that smashed two people's heads. Sanhua, tell them, how did you do that? Dragon Lady's eyes stopped moving when she heard this, and she blinked a few times. But she quickly became shy, rubbing her hands in front of her chest, and the sharp blades on her elbows rubbed against each other, making a jarring sound. Me hee hee. I won't tell you. She rubbed her hands and laughed, standing on the same spot. Li Yunxin didn't force her, and said for her. That palm, she put it low. First, she broke Ji Yoshi's hand that was holding the magic pen, and broke his magic tool. Although the body of a cultivator is strong, it can't be compared to that of a demon. The scariest thing is their Taoist magic. So she broke his hand first. Then where did her palm hit? According to the momentum from the bottom up, it should have hit his face and smashed his head. But she swept up a bit and directly smashed his skull. Skull. I've told you before. This skull can be opened in a very dangerous situation. To force your spirit out of your body, at least you can stay conscious for a breath. It was better to be a lonely ghost than to be destroyed in both body and soul. So, she went from top to bottom, so that he couldn't escape even if he wanted to. She also rushed over like this. Shanji, you also rushed over like this. Think about it yourself. The big red-crowned rooster buried its head in its wings. After saying this, Li Yunxin turned to look at Sanhua. So this palm is really beautiful. Then little demon cat. Where did you learn these skills? It was not difficult to know some common sense, but it was more difficult to use common sense in a fight. She rushed over fiercely, and she did two things at the same time. This was a kind of fighting instinct that had been honed for a long time. Because of this instinct, she used her hidden advantage that her opponent didn't know to kill an emptiness realm Taoist, and a Taoist with intent realm with one palm. The problem was, she was just an emptiness realm, middle-level Taoist. Sanhua was confused by his question, and she blinked while standing by the wall. She pretended to think for a while, and then giggled. I forgot. Chapter 178. Since she said so, Li Yunxin didn't ask much. He looked at her seriously and said in a gentle tone, "Tell me when you remember." Then he didn't wait for Sanhua's reaction. He turned to the other end of the alley and gently waved his sleeves. With a swishing sound in the wind, the array formation he had set up was lifted. This part of the alley was reconnected to the real world. Then he saw the figure at the entrance of the alley. Li Yunxin knew that the figure was a doppelganger. When a cultivator reached the true state, the word true referred to the transformation of the soul into the real body. A cultivator of the true state could divide his soul into another self. He could think and cast spells. Everything was the same as the real self. The only difference was the strength of the soul and the ability to exist for a long time. Cultivators included Taoist Danqing. Taoist Danqing of the true state could use the soul of some Yin gods to draw a real body for them. This was another form of the soul into the real body. When Li Yunxin first met Mrs. Sanhua, he told her that it was a blessing to meet Taoist Danqing. He was talking about this. However, he was at the peak of the transcendent state, so it was impossible for him to do this. The transcendent state was to turn the virtual into the real. Once the painting was destroyed, the substance would disappear as well. However, Li Yunxin destroyed the painting that Sanhua possessed in the yard, but the real body was still there. This should be the method of the true state. There were probably only 2 people in the world who knew the secret behind it. Even he himself was still trying to figure it out. So when Yu Yunzi's clone saw the dragon lady behind Li Yunxin at the other end of the alley, there was a moment of shock on its face. It was genuine shock. But he quickly hid his expression. The doppelganger didn't move forward. He only asked from the other end of the alley, "You killed them?" The voice sounded hollow in the alley, and the tone at the end of the sentence was low. It was not a question, but a statement of fact. "I did," Li Yunxin answered. "Why did you set up the inhibition formation? I didn't see you kill them." Li Yunxin took a step forward, his body slightly leaning forward, his chin slightly raised, his face revealing an unruly sneer. "Do I need to explain to you what I do?" Yunzi doppelganger, or rather Yunzi, was silent for a while. His eyes quickly swept past the dragon lady behind Li Yunxin. "I don't want to make any mistakes." Compared to Li Yunxin's tone just now, this sentence was clearly showing weakness. It was completely different from the night it appeared. It seemed that the sudden appearance of the dragons behind Li Yunxin made him extremely uneasy and fearful. For thousands of years, there had only been 10 dragons in this world, Shinryu and Kyuko, and now the 11th had appeared. Although there were many ways to create something that looked like dragons in this world, but this dragon lady, appearing next to Hatred, Yunzi did not think it was a joke. Hatred seemed to be satisfied with Yunzi's tone of showing weakness. He sneered a few times and said, "Humph. I didn't want any mistakes, so I forbade the fruit of fate, so that their souls wouldn't escape. Do you think it's easy for me to do this? It's not like I'm going to use talismans like you little people." Forbade the fruit of fate, one of Dragon Son Hatred's innate abilities. Yu Yunzi immediately engraved this new discovery into his mind. Then he said, "Then the souls. Of course they were destroyed." Li Yunxin squinted his eyes impatiently. "Didn't you see that stupid Black Yama King came and left?" Yunzi did not say anything and looked up and down at Li Yunxin. It should be the truth. It was not impossible for those with high cultivation to avoid the souls left behind by the soul-reaping Yama King. But there was nothing in this world that could hide the souls. He did not see the souls of the 2 Taoists, so they were indeed destroyed. He tacitly agreed to this, but he did not leave. He looked at Li Yunxin with a gloomy expression. Li Yunxin became impatient again. "Why are you still not leaving? What are you doing?" Yunzi slowly raised his hand and pointed at the dragon lady behind Li Yunxin. "I've never seen her, nor heard of her." "Humph, Princess Tongtian. Of course you haven't heard of her." Li Yunxin looked at Yunzi contemptuously. "She is my daughter. You stinky Taoists are afraid of this and that. But do you have any sons or daughters? Ha 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 ha. Cultivators are not afraid of marriage. The Ji Yoshi and Ziguzi you killed just now were both Taoists born from cultivators' marriages." Yunzi calmly explained in exchange for 2 breaths of time to think. "She is Dragon Lady, the daughter of Lord Tongtian? With whom? I have never heard of her before." Li Yunqin was silent for a moment, then suddenly shook his head, his face revealing a resentful and contemptuous expression. Humph. Just one person. She was called Shi Junyu. It was interesting at the time, but who knew she would die in a few moves? After she died, she came out of her body. Hehe. I called her Shi Wana. Don't you think I didn't betray that woman? He seemed to be getting happier as he spoke. Hey, those idiots only know how to be afraid and slander me. If they knew about this, ha ha ha, wouldn't it be a good story? It was not a good story for a woman in the mortal world to die in a fit of lust. But Yunzi didn't intend to say this. His expression finally relaxed, revealing a smile. It's a good story. In that case, well, I and Lord Tongtian are conspiring on a great matter. Now that I see my niece, I can't be rude. I have a water-splitting thorn here. It's the most suitable for a woman to use. Niece, take it. Yunzi shouted in a low voice. Without any visible movement, an iron spine wrapped in a misty green light went straight to Sanhua. The iron spine, which Yunzi called a water-splitting thorn, came very slowly. Perhaps in the eyes of ordinary people, it was shooting out. But for Li Yunqin, as long as he wanted to, he could stop it with the raise of his hand. However, he glanced at it and didn't stop it. On the contrary, Sanhua raised her hand, grabbed the iron spine, and then made a sound of ha. Sparks sputtered from her palm, which lasted for a breath's time before stopping. After being held in her hand, the iron spine was still moving forward. But in the end, it didn't break through the solid scales on Dragon Lady's palm. But when she let go of her hand, there was nothing in her palm. The iron spine turned into a puff of green smoke and disappeared. Yunzi's expression became gloomy. That wasn't an iron spine or a water-splitting thorn. Right now, he was a real body that was separated from a part of his spirit, and he didn't carry any magic treasures with him. He just wanted to try. But that hatred didn't seem to be afraid of him trying. And that dragon lady took his psychic stab with her bare hands. Although it was a small trick, for him in the realm of immortals, it was just a casual strike. But other than the dragons, who were famous for their physical strength, there were no demons that could take a casual strike from a realm of immortals when they were in the realm of emptiness. This was a big deal. The 11th dragons appeared. The seriousness of this matter could almost be compared with Emperor Li becoming a ghost emperor. From a long-term point of view, dragons had existed in the world for so long, but it was never heard that they could give birth to a third generation. Yunzi let out a sigh of relief. Good. Congratulations, Lord Tongtian. After saying this, he turned around and left. As soon as he left, Li Yunqin turned around and looked at Ing Juran and Meng Ao, as if he had just sent away an ordinary guest, and spread out his hands. Do you know that you are in big trouble now? The two people who were still sitting in the shadow by the wall looked at Li Yunqin speechlessly, not knowing what to say. Big trouble was more than that. Big trouble was so big that they didn't know what kind of trouble it was. It was like a person walking on the side of the road. As soon as he turned a corner, he suddenly saw a landslide and a tsunami in front of him, and the world was upside down. When he looked back, he found that there was no way out. What else could he do but wait silently? Li Yunqin walked in front of the two people and squatted down. He looked at Meng Ao first. The best way is to kill you, he said to Meng Ao. Unfortunately, you are an old friend of mine. If I kill you, he will throw a tantrum, so you can't die. He turned around and looked at Ing Juran. The first time I saw you in the Chow family, I thought you were interesting. I didn't expect that you are still so interesting after so long. You are not a child, nor a young master who just came to Jianghu. You can still be interesting in the wind and rain. You are a really interesting person, and I don't want to kill you. The two Jianghu warriors carefully breathed a sigh of relief, but they didn't feel relieved. There were too many people in Jianghu who laughed and talked wittily, and then turned around and cut people into pieces. And whether they knew it or not, the beautiful young man in front of them was indeed good at it. So they still stared at Li Yunqin's eyes. But they couldn't look at him directly. That would be considered a provocation. They could only stare at his throat. After looking for a while, they found that his skin was shockingly smooth. It didn't even have pores and skin texture like a human. It was just a layer of smooth and tight skin. Sure enough, he was a demon. So they quickly looked away and only looked at his clothes. Li Yunxin thought for a while and sighed. Tell me about it. You followed those two fools for a few days. You must have seen Lu Gongzan, right? People don't dare to recognize him because he has become younger. But you must have seen him when he was young. Old Meng. If you know he is in the dragon cult, why did you still come to the dragon cult to make trouble? Meng Ao had been silent. But when Li Yunxin mentioned Lu Laodao, his face finally became lively. He looked at Ing Juren. The latter frowned and nodded. Then he quickly glanced at Li Yunxin. Meng Ao opened his mouth. His voice was very hoarse. This actually, Sai. I know that my old friend is in your cult. But thinking about. Li Yunxin smiled kindly. Don't be burdened by your thoughts. Say it boldly. In front of me. There is no such thing as a crime because of your words. Meng Ao looked at his face, as if he had made up his mind. Sigh. To tell you the truth, I originally wanted to break up the dragon cult, and then deceive my old friend to go to the mountain. Our castle is indeed lacking a strategist. Li Yunxin clapped his hands. Oh, you even left a way out. Which castle? Why do you need a strategist? Okay, you tell me about this. He pointed at Ing Juren. In the eyes of the two martial artists, Li Yunxin, the people behind him who didn't speak and only stared at them with creepy eyes, the two cultivators just now, and the person who appeared and left, were all the same kind of people. Immortals, demons and demons. No matter what kind of fight they had, no matter who was strong or weak, in their eyes, they were all terrifyingly strong, far beyond their understanding. But the two cultivators only asked him some questions casually. They weren't really interested. But the person in front of them, Ing Juren, had been in Jianghu for a long time. He knew that he seemed to be really interested. Once he knew this, he suddenly wasn't so afraid. Instead, it was like he was extremely afraid. A string in his heart broke. Not only was he not afraid, but he also felt, maybe he could grab something. The other party didn't belong to this world. The world he lived in was too mysterious, too magical. And as long as he got permission, he could reach out and grab something in that world. Maybe he could get something that everyone in this world would be jealous of. So he looked at Li Yunxin's expression and said in a low voice, I won't hide it from Sendo. The castle he was talking about was the Black Stockade Castle. The Black Stockade Castle is on Mount Chuyan. Mount Chuyan is 300 miles east of the city of Wei, separated from the Wilderness Mountain. Get to the point. Li Yunxin interrupted him. Everyone hasn't had dinner yet. Mainly, what kind of organization is your Black Stockade Castle? Does it have any anti-human tendencies? Sendo, you mean? What does our Black Stockade Castle do? Ing Juren asked tentatively. Li Yunxin patted his palm with his folding fan, turned around and said to the 5 demons with disappointment. Look. I like people who can understand me. It's hard to talk to you guys. Learn it well. After receiving his praise, Ing Ju heaved a sigh of relief. We are from Black Stockade Village. Our Black Stockade Castle is, Sendo doesn't eat the food of the common people, so he doesn't understand the suffering of the common people. But right now the Daqing state, is already finished. Great. I like this tone. Li Yunxin sighed in admiration. So your Black Stockade Castle is a mafia-style organization that intends to stir things up. And the scale is quite large. Right now, you've already started to consider the problem of personnel. So, are you planning to bring Lu Gongzan up the mountain and do something big? Are you planning to get rid of the Qing Emperor and become the Emperor yourself? Ing Juren was in a daze. He thought for a while before saying, Sendo. Our Black Stockade Castle is only planning to enforce justice on behalf of heaven. You know right now. How many people are on the mountain now? Li Yunxin ignored him. 200 people. Great. How long have you been working on this? 200 desperados? Or old and young people? 200 people who can fight, 1,000 old weak women and children. It's been more than 3 years since I started planning this. Li Yunxin stood up, took 2 steps back, and let out a long breath. He stared at Ingjuren for a while, gave him a thumbs up and exclaimed, "You're a F*** king genius." In the hinterland of the Daching state, 300 miles away from the city of Wei, a place where people won't starve to death if they put up with it, 1,000 people are going to rebel. Ingjuren hurriedly waved his hand. No, Sendo, I'm just acting on behalf of heaven. You come and work with me. There's no future in that place. Li Yunxin paced 2 steps on the spot. Qian Mountain. I've heard of this name. It's a remote place with many rocks and dangerous terrain, so there's not many people. So, no one will care about you for a while if you set up a stronghold there. But if you want to rebel, that place can't be a base. I guess it's a problem for you to eat now. Li Yunxin looked at him. That's settled. I'll let you two go back. You two go back and mobilize people, bring people to the city of Wei. Don't worry about what to do when you come to the city of Wei. 300 miles, you two go in batches. If you really come to me, you won't be able to leave in a month. At that time, I'll have the final say in the city of Wei. Ingjuren and Meng Ao were dumbfounded, but they really couldn't get a word in. When Li Yunxin finished, Ingjuren said again, Sendo, I'm really just acting on behalf of heaven. Li Yunxin seemed to be angry. He stared at him and pointed at him. Young, shallow and childish. You said the Daching state is doomed? Let me ask you, why do you think it's doomed? Do you think there are more farmers who lost their land, and the business in the city is not doing well? You tell me. If the Qiao family wasn't so poor that they went crazy, they wouldn't need to send the head of the family to go out for the escort, to bet all their wealth on that escort. Those small escort agencies in the city of Wei were also set up. But what's the reason? Because they want to go to the Li state? Because the domestic small escort agencies can't do business anymore. I've been in the city of Wei for so long that I know. But only your simple feudal business thinking thinks it's doomed. Let me tell you now, it's called annexation. Land annexation, business annexation, the concentration of resources in the hands of the rich and powerful, and the shrinking of private capital. This is doomed, but it's not something you can see in your life. After the annexation, the rich and powerful can at least extend the life of the Daching state for another 50 years, but the process of annexation will take another 50 years. So let me tell you, you have to think that the Daching state is doomed every day, and when the Daching state is doomed, and when the refugees are everywhere, then rise up. You can wait for 100 years. But if you don't even have such a long-term and wrong judgment, and really just think that some people can't live on anymore, and gather together to make them live a better life, Comrade Ingjuren, you have to remember this. As individuals, people may be polite, righteous, and have a sense of shame and gratitude. But once people form a group, there is no sense of shame and morality to speak of. They will become naked animals of profit. The group will magnify their nature infinitely. In a country formed by groups, if they want land, they fight. If they can't win, they sit down and talk. If they lose, they beg for mercy and pretend to be weak. Once there is profit to speak of, even if someone rushed into your house and killed millions of people decades ago, you will still shake hands and make peace. This is the group of people. Naked interests are supreme, and individual morality does not exist at all. Now they are not living well, and have no food to eat, so they follow you to live well and eat. In the future, when you really let them live well, and have enough to eat, they will stretch out their hands and ask you for more. You can't give it to them? Goodbye, sir, we're going down the mountain. No one will remember your kindness. If you want them to follow you, you have to brainwash them, give them a program, and give them a distant but achievable hope. A group of people follow you up the mountain to rob houses, and then you tell them that you don't want to rebel. What will happen to them in the future? What about their sense of belonging? What about their collective sense of honor? So don't talk to me about enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens. You just want to rebel. Li Yunxin gave him a kick. Now stand up and follow this old Meng out of the city immediately. Go back and get people here. If you don't want to do it, I will either report you to the authorities, or I will personally demolish your house. Go now. The kick made Ingjuren grimace in pain, and he felt that his bones were about to break. He quickly stood up by holding onto the wall. He really didn't know what to say. It should be known that from the moment he spoke to him until now, only a quarter of an hour had passed. The two stood up and looked at each other. On one side, Li Yunxin was about to kick and drive him away, and on the other side, the two wanted to say something. Just because of a sentence from Sendo, they were going to abandon their original stronghold and bring people to the city of Wei. 300 miles. Normally, when moving from one end of the alley to the other, it would take at least half a month on and off. Such a big matter. How could he treat it like a child's play? Just by himself, making the decision? But Li Yunxin was already impatient with their dawdling. With a wave of his sleeve, the two were carried by a gust of evil wind and were sent 2 or 3 streets away. In the wind, they could hear him saying gloomily, "Think about what I said." They didn't know whether it was a blessing or a curse. When the alley finally quieted down, Li Yunxin was silent for a while and put away the relaxed tone he used when he talked to Ingjuren. He looked at the 5 demons behind him. Yunzi is planning how to deal with me. In his eyes, what happened today was just the first step. But in my eyes, the war has already begun. You have gotten much more from me than the other demons. Now it's time for you to repay me. He glanced at the 5 demons one by one and said, "I hope that after this war ends, at least one of you can survive. Now you have to know something." The second day came. On the second day when Li Yunxin said, "The war has already begun," it seemed that no one could feel the tense atmosphere except for him. It was even more relaxed than the previous days, because at least before all the Taoist priests in the city of Wei died, Yunzi was cooperating with the dragon cult. Taoshi Road was still under construction, but it seemed that as a reward for killing the 2 Daotong cultivators last night, the Yu family came and said, "We can build the righteous canal in the farmstead of White Beans in the southeast of the city." Building an irrigation system and building bridges and roads were one of the first requests of Li Yunxin. But after the Yu family went to see someone in the Shangqing Danding Sect's office in the city of Wei, this matter was put aside. Now it was restarted. Of course, it was because the dragon cult advised people to do good. So-and-so contributed a certain amount of money to build a righteous canal for the bean farm. The hierarch of the dragon cult had to show up. That day, a group of people stood beside the bean field that Li Yunxin and Lu Laodao had seen together. At least in the eyes of the nobles who were used to the splendor of the city of Wei, it was a boring and depressing affair. The sun was burning above their heads, and the cicadas were screaming desperately. The muddy water from the paddy fields lay in the muddy ditches, where even toads did not like to wallow. 3 rich merchants in thin silk clothes surrounded Li Yunxin and stood on the ridge of the field. Behind them was a group of listless helpers who were waiting for this damn thing to end and go to work or avoid the heat. But the sallow and emaciated people who came from the farmstead by the side of the field now had a strange look on their faces. They did not mention the 3 merchants who paid, but only stared at Li Yunxin and mumbled some vague words, presumably to thank him or to praise him. The 3 merchants felt even more bored, but they could not turn around and leave, because on the surface, they were the ones who paid, but they were the shopkeepers of the shops under the Yu mansion, and they were only there to cover their ears and keep up appearances. So no matter how impatient they were, they knew that the hierarch of the dragon cult was the favorite of the master of the Yu family. Even if they were asked to jump into the field to help pour water, they had to grit their teeth, swallow their stomachs, and hold their breath to do it. Now the hierarch of the dragon cult was in a good mood. He first said a few words to the people in the farmstead. He started with "I'll say a little more," and "I'll say a little more." In between he interspersed with "I'll add one more," and "there are 3 more points." The ending was a long and terrifying "I'll say a few more words," and the last point. Finally, the grateful bean farmers lifted their sleeves to wipe their sweat and looked up to see where the sun was now. When he finally finished a lot of tedious words, he announced that he would do the first shovel. Unfortunately, the hierarch of the dragon cult was a great person. He could say beautiful words, was handsome, and had a good heart. But even so, he did not know how to build a canal. He first asked where to start, and the rich merchants behind him hurried the helpers as if they had been pardoned, and answered. Then the hierarch pretended to count with his fingers, frowned, and said that the direction was not right. The righteous canal was a canal. It was so long, and there was a long stream of water in it, which contained dragon aura. If the direction of the dragon aura was not right, it was very likely to anger the vast sea, and kiss the dragon prince. That was a big deal. Hearing this, the bean farmers were scared and didn't dare to say anything. The three rich merchants didn't listen at all, and only wiped their sweat. The helpers listened, but they were the ones who built the canal on the other side of the rice field, so they knew that this was nonsense. But secretly, some smart people guessed the idea of the hierarch of the dragon cult. He just wanted to intimidate the bean farmers. Those bean farmers were poor. If you gave them benefits, they could negotiate, but if not, they would turn hostile and ignore you. They were the true wicked people. It seemed that the young dragon cult hierarch wanted to make those bean farmers feel that he was really unfathomable. So he said these frightening words to scare them. After scaring those wicked people, the dragon cult would come here to recruit more believers. They had already been treated well by the dragon cult, and when they thought of the mysterious hierarch, they wouldn't believe him anymore. So the helpers didn't say anything, and just let the hierarch do whatever he wanted. He saw the sect leader take a shovel from an old Taoist accompanying him. It was an iron shovel. Then, ignoring the scorching sun and the dirt in the fields, he pretended to walk back and forth muttering something. He dug a shovel on a ridge of the fields. Then he straightened his back, cheerfully looked at the crowd, and waved his hand. Come, come, Mr. Liu, the second shovel. Don't forget the digger when eating beans, and let the villagers remember your kindness. Hearing this, the wicked people clapped and cheered, and laughed foolishly. Mr. Liu, who was called by the hierarch, was stunned. Under the gloating eyes of the other two, he forced a smile and walked over. The hierarch of the dragon cult didn't give him the shovel. Instead, he said, "If I don't do the first ditch myself, the Dragon King will blame me." Then the two of them worked together to dig the second shovel. They thought this was the end of the matter. Who would have thought that this madman would actually call everyone over to dig together with him? 3 wealthy merchants and more than 50 skilled helpers were here to help. More than 200 bean farmers who were watching the scene. This madman called all of them over, and they all dug with the shovel. At first, some people wanted to watch the fun, to see how long he could last. But after watching for 2 hours, no one could laugh anymore. Those bean farmers who were laughing also couldn't laugh anymore. At first, they thought it was interesting to see the hierarch forcing people from the city of Wei to do rough work. Later, dozens of people went over, and they all admired the hierarch, because he really dug with the shovel for such a long time. In the end, the admiration turned into fear. This hierarch really had divine power. They had already dug half a mile. Although the digging was crooked, the hierarch didn't even sweat, and didn't look tired. He dug 1 foot deep with every shovel, which meant he had used all his strength. When the last person let go, Li Yunxin straightened up. The hem of his white robe and trousers were covered with mud, and he didn't look handsome at all. But he smiled, stuck the shovel on the ground, opened his hands and said loudly, "The one we dug is the testimony of the relationship between the dragon cult and the villagers. I think it should be called the Divine Dragon Canal. In the future, the clear water in the canal will continue to flow, and the dragon cult will protect the villagers. What do you think?" Those simple and unruly bean farmers had already been convinced by the hierarch of the dragon cult, and they all said yes, yes, yes. Li Yunxin said with satisfaction, "Then I will carry the first bucket of water." The 3 rich merchants heard this, and felt that they couldn't stand still anymore. So they worked from noon until the sky was full of colorful clouds, and then they left. The so-called Divine Dragon Canal was glittering and beautiful, but it was not on the righteous canal at all. But the bean farmers who were full of satisfaction and admiration still wanted to keep it. The hierarch of the dragon cult was the first noble they had seen in their lives who knew how to do farm work. At night, Yunzi knew about this. He frowned and thought for a long time. He wanted to know what Li Yunxin was going to do. It couldn't be that simple. He wanted to intimidate them, make the bean farmers feel special, and make them feel grateful and so on. Only stupid people would think like that. To gain respect and awe, doing things personally, and going deep into the people were always the stupidest ways. That would only make people think, oh, that's all. The real noble only needed to be high and mighty, and people would give them respect and awe. Hatred wouldn't do that kind of stupid thing. What did he want to do? Chapter 179. Yunzi sat quietly until late at night, and called someone in. It was a female cultivator. Her appearance was ordinary, and her figure was not graceful. But she was a cultivator after all, so she always had an air of elegance. She received a small favor from Yunzi 10 years ago, so she didn't want to come now. But she was a timid person. Because she was timid, she didn't want to come. And also because she was timid, she came. She knocked on the door, pushed the door open, and stood in the hall. She heard Yunzi, who was sitting in the dark, said, "About 100 miles away from the city of Wei, there is a southern mountain in the wilderness forest by Dongting Lake. There is a mountain god temple on the southern mountain, and there is a Taoist nun in the secular world named Shirquizi. Go and invite the nun here. Take care of her belongings, and bring all the important ones back." The female cultivator waited quietly for a moment. Seeing that Yunzi didn't have any other orders, she bowed and turned to go out. Yunzi was still sitting quietly in the dark. 2 hours passed like this. The sky was getting brighter, and so was the room. The incense in the incense burner burned all night, and now it was burned out. The door was pushed open. The female cultivator Qing Fuzi said to another person outside the door, "I don't want to hurt you. Don't struggle needlessly. The Taoist just wants to ask you a few questions." Yunzi slightly frowned, reached out his hand, and grabbed the person outside the door and threw her to the ground. Qing Fuzi hurried in to see what was going on. But Yunzi had already asked directly, "What did you find?" The female cultivator was stunned and closed the door. She walked to Yunzi, took out a few things from her arms, and showed them to him. An elixir spell, but it's unorthodox and full of mistakes. An iron sword, a steel sword, and a peachwood sword. They are all ordinary items. A jade pendant. Even if it's made of bad material, it's still an ordinary item. A talisman. It looks like it was made by the Shangqing Danding sect, and its power is not bad. But she can't use it now. There's also a bag of sweet potatoes and a wooden plate. Yunzi sighed and interrupted her. "Didn't you bring her here for anything else? Does she have a passage technique?" The Taoist magic, mentioned by the cultivators, was naturally not the crude tricks of the unruly Taoist priests. Qing Fuzi thought for a moment and answered seriously. "He raised his sword to stab me, but I knocked it away. I subdued her and searched her room first. At that time, she put something in her mouth and swallowed it." Yunzi frowned slightly. "What is it?" "I couldn't see it clearly." Yunzi sighed again, as if he really wanted to say something to this Qing Fuzi, but there was really nothing to say. He could only wave his hand helplessly. "All right. You've worked hard." Then he looked at Shirquizi, who was lying on the ground. The female Taoist was thrown to the ground quite heavily. After all, he was just a mortal who practiced some superficial Taoist techniques, unlike Lu Laodao, who was a genius in Taoism. Therefore, she couldn't recover from the fall for a long time. When Yunzi looked at her, she propped up her upper body, but she didn't know which part of her leg was injured, so she couldn't stand up. The female Taoist didn't seem to be willing to struggle to stand up. That would make her look very awkward. Courage was secondary, so she simply crossed her legs slowly and sat down as if she was meditating. Seeing her do all this, Yunzi had a premonition that the following questions would probably not be very pleasant. If she struggled to stand up, this kind of brave person was easy to deal with. If she curled up on the ground and shivered, this kind of coward was even easier to deal with. However, it was really difficult to deal with this woman. He asked first, "Do you know who I am?" Shirquizi looked at him seriously and smiled slightly. "You hide in the dark and don't see anyone. How can I know who you are?" Yunzi also smiled. "Hee, you won't recognize me even if you see me. Let me tell you. I'm the president of the Law Institute of the Langya Cave of Daotong, the enlightened immortal Yunzi. Now I want to ask you some questions. If you tell me the truth, I will give you the opportunity to enter my Langya Cave of Heaven. From then on, you will focus on practicing the divine heart technique and get hundreds of years of life. If you have good luck, you may be immortal and live as long as heaven and earth. If Sendo wants to ask, just ask. Shirkuizi took advantage of his pause to interrupt him. I don't care much about cultivation. The green beetle on the side listened to her words and seemed to want to persuade her. But he held back. The morning sun rose, and the room was filled with morning light. Yunzi's face gradually became clear. The Taoist in the truth state stared at Shirkuizi for a while and said calmly, Cave of Heaven and School of Thought may sound very distant to you secular people. It's too profound and mysterious, but it makes you feel distant and estranged. It's not even as tempting as a bowl of rice placed in front of a starving person. You live in Nanshan and go up and down the mountain every day. If you practice the divine art, climbing the mountain is like walking on flat ground. It won't be more tiring than taking a leisurely stroll. You are a secular person, you will grow old and die. If you eat less, you will be hungry. And if you drink less, you will be thirsty. If you are exposed to the cold, you will be sick. Your eyes and ears will be blurred. Your mouth will be dry. And your whole body will be sore. You won't know when you will recover or die from the illness. If you practice my divine heart technique, all these will be far away from you. I won't talk to you about longevity or divine art. I only want to tell you that if you join my Taoism, your life will be comparable to that of a noble, and you will have fewer troubles and worries of the secular people. Shirkuizi sighed softly. I am not afraid of troubles and worries. If Sendo wants to ask, just ask. If I can answer, I will answer. If I can't, I won't answer even if I die. Yunzi was silent for a while and said, Okay, then let me ask you first, that Lu Gongzan, what kind of technique is he practicing? Divine heart technique. Shirkuizi answered. My Daotong has 54 divine heart techniques, and there are 54 Kenzo techniques. Yunzi said, From what I can see, the Dao technique that Lu Gongzan is practicing doesn't belong to any of the 108 divine heart techniques. Then, you are saying that he is practicing the Dao technique of green elixir. The Dao technique of green elixir that has been passed down. I don't know. Shirkuizi closed her eyes. Yunzi sighed. If you enter my heavenly cave and go through the tribulation of love and desire, you will know how laughable your current thoughts are. An infatuated son and resentful daughter, risking life and death for love. That person might not be the person you think. If you die today, that Lu Gongzan will cultivate for 100 years in the future, and he will be in love with another woman. Will you die a worthy death? Shirkuizi widened her eyes and looked at Yunzi. I know. But what does it have to do with you? Qing Fuzi looked at Shirkuizi, then at Yunzi. The Truth Realm Taoist smiled and closed his eyes. After a moment of silence, he sighed and asked, What did she swallow? Yes, Qing Fuzi answered. Cut it open. Huh. Qing Fuzi was taken aback and looked at Yunzi again. Daotong wants to vanquish demons. This woman had a crucial clue. If he refused to confess, he would be helping the villain and colluding with the demons. It doesn't count as indiscriminate killing. Cut it open and take it out. He closed his eyes and said no more. Qing Fuzi's expression changed. He first looked at Yunzi, then at Shirkuizi, but it seemed that this matter was only related to her. Yunzi calmly closed his eyes to rest. Shirkuizi also closed her eyes and sat on the ground. She seemed to be the most flustered. After all, not every cultivator had killed before. In other words, there weren't many cultivators who had killed before. Qing Fuzi hesitated for a while, then plucked up his courage and said, Taoist priest, I think we should try to persuade her again. Huh. Yunzi opened his eyes a little and glanced at her. It's useless. This woman was a person with a firm will. I've seen many people like her. Don't waste your breath. Qing Fuzi opened his mouth. Then, Taoist priest's magic power is very strong. This kind of small matter. Do you need me to deal with such a small matter? Yunzi glared at her sternly. What's the use of you? Qing Fuzi could only sigh sadly and walk to Shirkuizi's side. The female Taoist priest of the mountain god temple didn't look at her. She was still sitting with her eyes closed and reciting Ziwei, the great scripture of eternal tranquility, in a low voice. The female cultivator glanced at her and sighed. Alas, alas. Then, she turned her head away and reached out to touch Shirkuizi's arm. Shirkuizi still didn't move. Her lips were tightly pursed. The female cultivator stopped when she touched her wrist. Then, she used her little finger to make a vertical stroke on her wrist. Her fingernail immediately scratched Mo Tianga's blood vessels. But before blood gushed out, the female cultivator had already stuck a talisman on Shirkuizi's wrist. Then, she hurriedly took 2 steps back, as if she was extremely afraid. Yunzi frowned. What are you doing? Qing Fuzi looked at Yunzi with a sad and aggrieved expression. Taoist priest, I'm afraid of blood. Yunzi was stunned. Then he looked at Shirkuizi. He found that the female Taoist priest who was calm and collected before was no longer reciting the scripture. She widened her eyes and tried to tear the talisman on her wrist with one hand. However, the talisman couldn't be torn off, let alone torn off. The words on the yellow paper were originally very faint in cinnabar, but now they were getting redder and redder. The redness was so dazzling, and the strokes were so full that it looked like blood was about to drip out. Only then did Yunzi re-evaluate the green beetle. She was indeed afraid of blood. Therefore, she had to use the talisman to suck Shirkuizi's blood first. During this process, the woman was still conscious and alive. She could only watch her own life slowly pass away. The Taoist priest in the true state laughed loudly. Ha ha ha. You are also a wonderful person. Qing Fuzi looked at Yunzi blankly. Then she looked at Shirkuizi. The female Taoist priest tried to tear the talisman 4 or 5 times, and after 2 breaths she collapsed. Her face was like a dried corpse. Her eyes were not closed, and her mouth was slightly open. Obviously, she had suffered a great deal before she died. At this moment, Qing Fuzi was relieved. He walked briskly to Shirkuizi's body, and used his fingernails to cut open her Taoist robe, underwear, skin, muscles, and stomach. Then, he reached into her stomach and took out a roll of white silk that had lost its original color. At this moment she didn't frown, nor did she feel uncomfortable. She didn't care about the filth on the silk. She stretched it out and looked at it carefully, before showing it to Yunzi. The Taoist priest in the true state frowned in disgust. Read it for me. Qing Fuzi took 2 steps back and slowly read it to him. It was the incantation of the water cloud force. But many parts of it were blurred and turned into a lump. Qing Fuzi could only recognize 30 to 40% of it. But it was enough for Yunzi, who was an expert in Taoism. He closed his eyes and thought for a while. Then he said in a low voice, "It's not the 108 methods, but it seems to be the divine heart technique. The divine heart technique has something in common. So it's the Taoism of painting. That Lu Gongzan cultivated the Taoism of painting. He is a Taoist of painting." Qing Fuzi looked at him in confusion. But Yunzi didn't need her to understand. He just said it out of habit. This would make his thinking clearer. So what they are doing outside the city, in the fields, he. The Taoist priest in the true state suddenly understood. He squinted his eyes, and his eyes flashed with danger and excitement. What a big plot. That Long Sun, that Taoist, are using the land around the city of Wei as a scroll to draw a painting array. Qing Fuzi blinked. She didn't really understand. Because she was a low-level cultivator, she didn't have the chance to see the Taoist of painting. Everything about the Taoist of painting, painting school, and painting saint was taboo. Even Yunzi didn't know much about it. But he was a Taoist priest in the true state, the president of the Law Academy of the Paradise Scripture, and he had contact with the Taoist of painting in Daotong. After contact he understood. He could infer many things from one instance, and thus knew. We in Daotong write talismans. Everything in the world has a real name. We write their real names to mobilize the power of heaven and earth. Yunzi said in a low and slow voice. But the painting school takes a different path. They draw the spirits of all things in the world. Although the inheritance in Taoism can't be compared with the Daotong Kenzo, Taoism is also mysterious. Alas, it can be considered as the great Tao. These things are hard to say. It's just that our talismans are like skeletons, and the paintings of the painting school are like flesh and blood. Using the land around the city of Wei as a scroll. Haha, what a big move. Yunzi thought for a while. This can explain why Hatred and Lao Dao had to dig such a long canal when they were building it. It wasn't digging, it was painting. When we write talismans, we need to pour in spiritual power. And so does the painting of the painting school. Such a long canal, in fact, is just a drawing. Yunzi sighed again. What a big move. Haha. So this was his real purpose. Absorbing the power of faith, preaching, and gaining the belief of the followers were all just a cover-up. Even I was almost fooled. In fact, Yazi doesn't want the power of wish. He painstakingly created a divine dragon sect, and deliberately showed me a lot of flaws. All in order to make me relax my vigilance. Making me think that he only wants the power of wish. Making me think that he built bridges and roads, and benefiting the people, was just to get people's worship. Haha. But the real goal is to use the canals, roads, and bridges that have been built as markings to draw a grand formation. Painting school, painting saint. Qing Fuzi didn't know much about these things. Or rather, he didn't understand them at all. The painting saint and the painting school had been destroyed for 2,000 years. Even the accurate records of the events of 2,000 years ago would be distorted beyond recognition. Not to mention the things that Daotong and Kenzo had the intention to wipe out. Chapter 180. Although he didn't understand these things, he understood Taoist techniques. Qing Fuzi couldn't help but frown. Taoist priest, there is one thing. When we write true talismans, every stroke is imbued with spiritual power. This spiritual power is our own spiritual power. Then, those strokes are combined to form a true name, and then a small formation is formed. The spiritual power flows in the formation, growing and multiplying, and then it absorbs the spiritual power of heaven and earth from the surroundings. This is a suitable talisman. But he draws here and there. I don't know the Taoist techniques of painting, but since Taoist priests said that it has something in common with heaven's will, then it shouldn't be too different from the art of talismans. Then if the imprints and drawings aren't connected, the spiritual power can't form a formation. Then how can the drawings work? Yunzi squinted his eyes, looking into the distance, as if he was looking at hatred. So this is the brilliance of that dragon son. Alas, there is such a character among the demons, and we only know that he is cruel and unreasonable. If he is not a demon, if that Qing Liangji also has such wisdom, alas. He sighed repeatedly. This demon, I have to kill him. This kind of hatred can't live in this world, and can't live next to my bed. Qing Fuzi quietly listened to him lamenting. After he finished lamenting, he said, so this is a plan to kill 3 birds with 1 stone. The power of hope. The talismans we write are imbued with spiritual power, so they are suitable. In simpler terms, for a talisman to work, there are 2 basic conditions. First, every stroke needs spiritual power. The spiritual power in the strokes has 2 functions: to guide the flow of spiritual power after the formation is formed, and to ensure that each stroke is not a casual stroke of the secular people, but a Taoist technique. Secondly, this talisman also needs to have sufficient spiritual energy to immerse the entire talisman in spiritual energy. You guys don't know this. Do you know why? Because cultivators below the emptiness realm can't control the big formation. They only need to write on the talisman. Daotong talismans are custom-made to take care of you guys. But if you just write on a regular talisman, the second condition is easily met. The world is full of spiritual power. In fact, the talisman you write is already immersed in spiritual power, so you don't need to think about this problem. But after reaching the transcendent state, cultivators can do another thing: make a big formation. Just like what hatred did, he used the land around the city of Wei as a paper to make a big formation. This is a cultivator's great skill. When he and Taoist Dan Qing went to dig the canal, they were actually pouring their spiritual energy into the canal. That satisfied the first point. Spiritual power is imbued in every stroke. You can pay attention to this point later. Whether they repair the bridge or pave the road, Yizi and that Taoist priest Danqing will definitely do it themselves. Every road and bridge is planned and designed by them. As for the others, they don't need to do the work themselves. That's undoubtedly a smokescreen. True and false, false and real. This is Dragon Sun's usual method. This hatred, scheming and cautiousness are really rare in the world. Then the second point. This talisman or painting scroll is going to be soaked in spiritual energy. Qing Fuzi seemed to be fascinated. In fact, compared to the intrigue, what she was really interested in was this. This was the profoundness of the Tao. The second point, hehe. That's exactly what I wanted to say. Yunzi sighed in admiration. If I want to make a big array, the best choice is the city of Wei. There were 300,000 people in the city of Wei, and the yang energy was abundant, which could be transformed into spiritual energy with a little effort. Once the city of Wei was used as the scroll, the talisman was soaked in the spiritual power transformed from the yang qi of 300,000 people in the city of Wei. But this hatred, haha, he's really an ambitious person. He will only use the city of Wei with its soaring yang energy as the finishing touch, as the eye of the array, then the bigger scroll than the city of Wei, including the cultivated land around the city of Wei. Where will the spiritual energy come from? Yunzi stood up while saying, haha, from the power of faith and wish of those farmers and farmers. At this moment, the power of faith may not be enough. But don't forget that making clouds and summoning rain is the special skill of the dragons. At that time, when the dragon sun ascends the altar of the dragon god cult and summons the rain with a loud shout, those farmers who are anxious about the bean seeds, especially in this year's harvest situation, where people are going to starve to death, how strong will their faith and power will be? The big array will be completed. Speaking of this, Yunzi finally couldn't hold back the excitement in his heart, and suddenly raised his arms. Suddenly, the spiritual qi in the room was turbulent, and the wind was strong. All the doors and windows were opened, and the sunlight from outside the room instantly filled the whole room. And this Yunzi figured everything out, and laughed heartily. Good, good, good. What an unparalleled demon, Lord Tongtian. You deserve to be my, Yunzi's opponent. You have the guts of a dragon and tiger, and I have the heart of a zither and sword. I'll let you die a glorious death on that day. Ha 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 ha. Qing Fuzi looked at Yunzi in a daze. He still didn't quite understand what he was talking about. At the same time, Yunzi was not the only one who laughed. There was also Wang Sheng, the one who opened a calligraphy and pen shop in front of the abandoned palace square on the street of the old city. His legal wife was the daughter of a concubine from the fourth branch of the Yu mansion. According to Li Yunxin, she didn't look good. But originally, he couldn't climb up to a high branch. When the Wang family was on good terms with the master of the fourth branch, the family was still in decline. But when it came to his father's generation, the family was not only in decline, but collapsed. But the master of the fourth branch was planning to recommend a son of the family to be filial to the Wei River mansion. So he fulfilled his wish. The master of the Yu mansion was a man of his word, and he didn't despise the poor son of an old friend. This was a good reputation. Then Wang Sheng didn't get what he wanted, and even asked the young lady of the Yu mansion to sell her dowry, to keep up appearances. Until one night, he met a strange man in the calligraphy and pen shop in front of the abandoned palace square. The strange man gave him the prescription of the black medicine. He was lucky enough to succeed. After a few days of preparation, he actually succeeded. But this kind of thing, even if it was done, was useless in daily life. But soon, it was said that the Yu mansion was going to help the dragon cult build bridges, pave roads, and cut stones in the mountains. Wang Sheng knew that his black medicine was powerful, and he remembered that the strange man said before he left that night, "In a few days, there will be a chance for you to show your talent." He didn't care who the strange man was, or what he wanted to do with him. He shamelessly ran to the fourth branch's mansion, and after a lot of shouting, he finally saw the steward and told him about his situation. Empty talk was naturally no proof. Fortunately, the steward watched his wife grow up, and although he didn't like him, he still loved his young lady. So he frowned and followed him to experience. Then he ran back to the Yu mansion and told them that the master had gone. How powerful was the black medicine? The black gunpowder prescription that Li Yunxing gave him? Actually, it wasn't. There weren't even any skilled stonemasons who used traditional methods to mine the stones. However, in this matter of the Yu family cooperating with the divine dragon cult, everyone wanted to put in some effort to win Yu family's favor. Moreover, it was also a good thing to have a good relationship with the rising cult. It was said that the person behind the dragon cult was the master of the Shangqing Danding sect in the city of Wei. The master of the fourth branch was worried that he didn't have a way to please his elder brother, and now his son-in-law, whom he had long forgotten, sent a good chance. This was a great joy. He called him to the mansion, talked to him, and asked for the prescription. Wang Sheng learned to be obedient at this time, and refused to hand over the prescription even if he died. His father-in-law had no choice but to ask him to go with him to see the clan leader, Master Yu. This was Wang Sheng's great joy. It was on such a morning that Wang Sheng planned to go out. He first went to the fourth branch to see his father-in-law, Mount Tai, and then to see the most powerful person in the Yu family. The day before yesterday, he met his father-in-law and received some money. When he came back, he cut 3 caddies of meat and stewed it in the pot. Wang Sheng, his wife, and the servant girl were so full that their stomachs were round, and they kept saying that they would never eat meat again. But when they woke up this morning with empty stomachs, they had long forgotten the taste of last night. They heated up the meat soup and meat dregs, and cooked a pot of white rice, mixed it with the lard from the meat, and wolfed it down. Wang Sheng ate until his head was steaming. He untied his clothes and walked to the eaves in front of the door. Looking at the rising sun, he thought about the possible riches and honor, and his chest was filled with heroic spirit. With heroic spirit, he was in the mood to write poetry. But after holding it in for a long time, he still couldn't say a word. He simply laughed out loud, feeling very carefree. His life had finally turned from the worst to the best. His wife sat on the porch and looked at him with a rare smile. She didn't frown like before, scolding him for not doing proper work and not finding a good job to make money. The servant girl was cleaning up the bowls and chopsticks in the hall. Seeing that the two of them weren't quarreling, she pursed her lips and smiled. She planned to clean up the table, help her master put on his clothes and hat, and send him out to the Yu mansion. The small courtyard wasn't big. With the thin bamboo, there were 2 patches of weeds, and 2 hens about to lay eggs in the courtyard. And 3 people. The next moment, Wang Sheng's laughter suddenly stopped. It was as if he was choking. Then he suddenly turned his head. His wife looked at him in confusion, asking him what was wrong. The servant girl also stopped what she was doing. Seeing Wang Sheng's suddenly wooden expression, she wondered if he had forgotten to prepare something. Under the gazes of the 2 women, Wang Sheng didn't say anything. He walked straight to the side of the thin bamboo in the courtyard. He stretched out his hand and chopped off a branch as thick as a thumb. His arm bent again, and the branch pierced into his neck. His expression was solemn and calm. Staring at his wife, he turned his wrist again and shook it hard, so that the branch pierced deeper and destroyed his windpipe, blood vessels, and daotong. Then he let go and fell to the ground with a thud. Blood hissed out from his neck. His wife and the servant girl were stunned where they stood. They stared at him for a long time, then looked at each other. The young lady of the Yu family fainted without a sound, and the servant girl screamed desperately. A gust of chilly wind swirled in the courtyard and went straight out the door. When this insignificant interlude occurred, Yu Yunzi had already summoned some people and issued some orders. Then he stood in the courtyard and couldn't help but laugh 3 times, because it was really carefree. He actually met such an enemy, and a demon at that. There were a few smart people in Daotong, but he would never treat them as enemies. At most, they were just opponents. Maybe in the future, when there were enough interests involved, that kind of situation might happen, but not now. As for demons, great demons above the true state were the key points. They were related to Daotong's plans for the world, so he couldn't touch them easily. Great demons were all idiots, at least in his opinion. He, Yunzi, was a genius, but had nowhere to show his strength. He was not as useful as those civil and military officials in the secular world. But now, he met this hatred. It was like meeting a worthy opponent, and he could try his best, without any scruples, and show the greatest amount of malice, all with the aim of killing the other party. How carefree was this? But it was only carefree. He didn't have any inexplicable feeling of mutual respect. Enemies were enemies. In his opinion, there was nothing to respect. If they were worthy of respect, then why not be friends? Because of interests or because of necessity? For a true state cultivator, it was very rare for them to be forced to do something. Because he was the most powerful cultivator among over 1 billion people in the known world. One of less than 1,000 people. He preferred to completely crush and knock down his opponent after carefree. How similar! This was the method that Long Sun used on Qing Liangzi. And he also deeply loved this Tao. What a lovely enemy. Yunzi looked at the direction of Long Sun in the city of Wei, shook his head with a smile, and turned to walk back to the house. At this moment, a gust of wind whirled and rolled up a few fallen leaves on the flagstone ground in the courtyard, to the feet of Qing Fuzi, who was standing beside Yunzi. The female cultivator suddenly shivered. It was very rare for a cultivator to shiver. This was because they were no longer bothered by worldly ailments. The moment Yunzi turned around, he noticed this and asked one more question. What's wrong? Qing Fuzi turned around and looked at him calmly. When will you kill Long Sun? The tone was calm and very familiar. This was the tone that Yunzi often used. It was the tone that high-ranking and powerful people usually used. After hearing this, the cultivator in the true state took a step back, and a layer of faint light appeared on his body. He looked up and down at Qing Fuzi, and said in a low voice, "Who are you?" "You have a close relationship with Qing Liangzi, so I am the same person as him." Qing Fuzi said calmly, "My name is Lin Liangzi." This sounded like a very strange Taoist name, but because it was strange, Yunzi was a little relieved. Because Qing Liangzi had mentioned to him 2 other people in the Freemasonry. One was called Hai Liangzi, and the other was called Li Liangzi. Both were very strange Taoist names. After Lin Liangzi revealed his identity, he immediately returned to the topic. He looked straight at Yunzi, and repeated in an unquestionable tone, "He must die. The sooner the better." Chapter 181. Yunzi didn't get angry because of his tone and suggestion, because he knew that if this Lin Liju was really Lin Liju, then the power behind him was very mysterious. Smart people didn't need friends, but they didn't need enemies either. However, he was a Taoist in the true state. Except for the 2 sages, no one in the world could talk to him so arrogantly. Therefore Yunzi smiled. "Are you ordering me or begging me?" Different from Qing Liju, who was often emotionally unstable, Lin Liju was calm and composed, like a Daotong or Kinzo cultivator, who had gone through all kinds of tribulations. He made Qing Fuzi's body emit a calm and low female voice. "Neither. I'm just giving you a positive suggestion, because it's more troublesome for me to do it myself, and I don't have a long-term plan like you in the city of Wei. Since it's a suggestion, don't be in a hurry." Yunzi raised his eyebrows, and a little excitement rose in his heart again. It was a feeling that he hadn't experienced for a long time, 100 years. Dragon Sun is a wonderful person, and I want to play with him. Qing Liju of your sect died in his hands, and he was also one of my few friends. Since your sect wants revenge, then don't be in a hurry. When he's at his most arrogant, smash him into dust. That's the most thorough revenge. Lin Liju shook his head without hesitation. I want to kill him not to avenge Qing Liju, but because he knows something he shouldn't know, and is trying to do something he shouldn't do, which is extremely dangerous. I still earnestly advise your lordship to kill him at once, preferably tonight. My sect will thank you for your kindness in the future, and you will be rewarded handsomely. Yunzi frowned slightly, and after thinking for a while he said, "Tell me first, what did he do that he shouldn't have done?" Lin Liju stared at him with a pair of calm eyes. The owner of this pair of eyes, whom Yunzi thought was slow and stupid a quarter of an hour ago, and said, "If you know the answer to this question, then you will also appear on my kill list." Yunzi sneered, What a big tone. Just the truth. Perfected Yunzi. This is not a threat. Then I'll give you a suggestion. Don't even think about killing him. Yunzi narrowed his eyes and looked at the unfamiliar Qing Fuzi. He's my plaything. He will die the way I want him to die. You dare to make me lose the pleasure that I haven't had in 100 years. Previously I liked Qing Liang. That person was interesting. And then I looked at the sect behind him. Do you think the Langya Paradise's first seat of law needs a generous reward from you? Frogs in the well don't know themselves. With that, he flicked his sleeves and entered the room. Qing Fuzi, whose body had been taken over by Lin Lizhu, stood in the courtyard in a daze for a while before saying patiently, "Perhaps he isn't the person you think he is. Maybe he had more secrets. If you insist on delaying his death, then I hope you will be more fully prepared. Do not fail." What answered him was a sneer. Qing Fuzi sighed, and then fell softly to the ground. A gust of chilly wind swirled around him, and he went out the door. "If I'm not mistaken, things will go smoothly," Li Yunqin said to Lu Laodao. As he spoke, he furrowed his brows. Now that he had fallen back to the beginner level of the transcendent state, the sudden change made him very uncomfortable. The discomfort was not only psychological, but also physical. The body was like a container, and the spiritual energy was like the water in the container. As the spiritual energy increased bit by bit, the container was gradually filled up. As it got bigger, all kinds of possible cracks were repaired. However, if the water in the container was suddenly emptied, the container would not feel good. It might even be like a fragile glass container that was suddenly sucked out of the air, and the container would be crushed in an instant. Brother Xian, you're right. It's going well. This morning, the people from the Yu family said that they are in a hurry to build our headquarters on Taoshi Road, and that they are going to build bridges and roads outside the city. There are no restrictions on the location and scale. We can do whatever we want. Lu Laodao looked at him worriedly. Brother Xian, with your current condition, do you still want to go by yourself? If I don't go by myself, how can I infuse the spiritual energy? Li Yunqin stood up. His lips were pale. He smiled as he walked out of the door. This is not the time to kill those swordsmen in the wild forest. I'll draw a painting for you to do the finishing touches. It's a shoddily made thing, and it has a high tolerance for mistakes. But now we have to deal with Yunzi, the enlightened master. It's scary. After a few steps, he felt that something was wrong, so he turned around and went back into the house. To get out of the city, he still had to use the name of building bridges and roads. The long robe looked beautiful, but it was not suitable. It was better to wear it short. Old Taoist Lu took the clothes he had changed out of, redid his hair bun for him, and helped him change into new clothes. Therefore, we can't make any mistakes in each stroke. If a single stroke went awry, the array would be finished. Yu Yunzi thinks that he has seen through me and is determined to defeat me. What do you think he is thinking? Haha. Li Yunqin put on his clothes and stretched his body. He winked at Lu Laodao. I told him how I killed Qing Liangzi, and he really remembered it. What a narrow-minded guy. He hates me so much that he wants to play with me like a mouse. He walked out of the door. He's the same as that Qing Liangzi. Lu Laodao followed behind him and listened to him. But there was still some worry in his eyes, because this time seemed to be different. In the past, when he schemed against prefectural magistrate Li and Lu Ling, Lu Laodao felt that he had no chance of winning. When he was desperate, he didn't care much. A little hope could brighten his heart. Now that he knew Brother Xian's means, he was told the inside story in detail. He felt that his plan was exquisite, his scheming was deep, and it was extremely terrifying. But because of this, he also knew that Yunzi and Li Yunqin were exchanging blows. He felt that the two were so intelligent that they were almost monsters. If it wasn't for the roundworms in their stomachs, it was really hard to say who would win. Maybe today, when they were complacent, Yunzi already knew everything? This feeling made Lu Laodao feel perturbed, but he saw joy from the heart on Li Yunqin's face. It was as if everything in this world was boring. Only when he fought with such a dangerous opponent on a steel wire between cliffs with a sharp knife could he feel that life was lively and bright again. Although Lu Laodao didn't want to think like this, He gradually knew a fact. That was, Brother Xian didn't seem to be a normal person. This kind of mentality made him feel unhappy. But he knew that Li Yunxin was a guy who could read people's minds by looking at their faces. So he didn't want to worry him at this time. When he walked out of the door, he found something new to talk about, so that he could distract himself. This morning, Mr. Li came to say that the young master of the Yu family, Yu Meng, wanted to see you and couldn't be stopped. But when he was walking here, something happened to the fourth branch of the Yu family. Now he has to come on behalf of Master Yu. So he really can't come. Thinking about it, I haven't seen him for a long time. And I didn't thank him for saving my life that time. Lu Laodao said as he walked in the warm morning sun. After walking for a while, he felt that his body gradually became hot. What a coincidence! But he was interrupted by Li Yunxin. What happened to the fourth branch? Pausing for a moment, he added, Is that Wang Mingde dead? Lu Laodao was very surprised that Brother Xian was interested in this kind of thing. But he could always change the topic. After thinking for a while, he said, I'm not sure about the name, but there's someone surnamed Wang. He married a concubine's daughter from the fourth branch. He hasn't been happy. I didn't tell him anything, I just saw him from afar. That time, I went to the fourth branch to do a painting, and I saw him from afar. A steward tried to seduce him, but he didn't even let him drink water. Sigh, this is also unsatisfactory. This time, he said he made some medicine, and I heard that it could be used to build a road in the mountain. He said he would see him this morning, but he committed suicide in the morning. Lu Laodao frowned. If you ask me, maybe he finally felt that he had a chance to make a name for himself. But the old man of the fourth branch wanted to take his prescription. After many years of depression, he was narrow-minded, so he made up his mind to commit suicide, and caused a big trouble. Sigh, I pity that wife of his. Lu Laodao talked endlessly, not noticing Li Yunxin's eyes. Li Yunxin's face calmed down, and his eyes became clear. Sure enough, a thunder that he left casually was triggered. The dark thunder had nothing to do with Yu Yunzi, Ling Kongzi, Qi Wen, Yazi and Dongting Lord. It had nothing to do with what he was about to do in the city of Wei. It was just because he felt that the quantum leap was weird, and the organization behind him was weird. And this world was even weirder according to the limited history he knew. So he randomly found a good-for-nothing person, and threw him a thunder. Now it exploded. Did this mean that he accidentally had that absurd idea? It was true. Lu Laodao turned and saw his face and was stunned. He stopped talking. Brother Xian, what's wrong? Nothing. Li Yunxin squinted his eyes and looked around subconsciously. Everyone in the Yu mansion knew that he and Lu Laodao didn't like to be disturbed, so all the maids and servants were dismissed. Now the two were walking on the busy street, going to the city gate to meet the people who were building the bridge today. There was nothing special on the street. Only, he would occasionally hear passers-by mentioning the divine dragon cult. The sun was shining, and the blue sky was dotted with a few clouds. Li Yunxin let out a sigh, and also to cover up his thoughts and said, Yunzi's people went to Nanshan earlier. Lu Laodao was stunned, and after a moment of silence he said, Li Yunxin didn't say anything else, and just walked side by side with him on the street. After a while Lu Laodao said, Will she be suspicious? After all, the dragon cult started trouble in Nanshan. Now we are going to the city of Wei, leaving her there alone. Master Lu thought for a moment. Then Yu Yunzi will think that we are cold-hearted and don't care about her life and death. But she will find the water cloud force. We shouldn't have left the person with the water cloud force on Nanshan Hill unprepared. This flaw is a bit obvious. Li Yunxin shook his head slightly. This is your thought, but not his. You and Shirquizi think the cloud force is a treasure. But Yunzi must have many scripts that are more profound than that. He has seen a lot. He won't think it's something great. He wasn't a wild Taoist like you were. Wild Taoists struggled to find the true scriptures, so you can understand their feelings. He used to be a high-ranking official, and he was brought back to the mountain by the Grand Master of the Cave Heaven, who went down the mountain. His starting point is different, so he can't understand your feelings. Lu Laodao said, and didn't ask more. He just walked gloomily. When they were about to reach the city gate, and saw two rich businessmen coming to greet them from afar, Li Yunxin turned his head and sighed. You really? I am not the kind of person who doesn't like to leave my name after doing good deeds. I like people praising me the most. If you can't be grateful to me, then say thank me. What's there to be embarrassed about? Lu Laodao was stunned, and then he felt a warm feeling in his heart. He didn't know whether he should smile with Li Yunxin, or keep a straight face, or shed tears of gratitude. Finally, he walked in front of Li Yunxin seriously, bowed deeply and said solemnly, Thank you, Brother Xian. Li Yunxin didn't help him up, and accepted the bow seriously. He grinned. You're welcome. Well, you thanked me, and I accept your bow. Don't worry about it in the future. We don't owe each other anything. Finish the work today. Bah! They did 4 big things in one day. The first one was to build a bridge over a small river called Bright Stream. The stream was quiet when the weather was good, but it would flood when it rained. Although it didn't rain often, the dragon cult master insisted on doing things here, so they had no choice but to obey. Li Yunxin and Lu Laodao personally laid the cornerstone. They used 81 bluestones to look like water, and said it was used to stabilize feng shui. Then there were 3 other roads. The first 2 roads went smoothly, but when it came to the third road, the dragon cult master said they had to go through a mountain. It wasn't a big mountain but a small hill. Originally, they could have gone around the hill, but the dragon cult master insisted on going through it. After going through it, they would have to cut through the mountain. According to the locals, there weren't any stones in the small hill, only sand. It wasn't impossible to cut through the mountain, but it would take some time and manpower. The dragon cult master smiled when he heard that. He immediately ordered everyone to stand far away, and only he stood on the spot, exhaled, and exerted force. A ray of golden light shot out from his palm, and immediately carved out a path in the middle of the small mound. This was the first time he performed a miracle, and also the first time people saw a powerful Taoist technique. At this time, the rich merchants who had been accompanying him, and even Mr. Li who was in the mansion, realized this young man wasn't a puppet. However, in Yunzi's eyes, there was only one key point. The third road was a straight line, a line that went through the small hill. It also had to be a straight line, to form a part of the painting. Because of this, he didn't take a detour, and because he impatiently displayed his divine power. Chapter 182. Building bridges, roads, and canals were not something that could be done in a day. But both Li Yunxin and Yunzi just needed a start. On the 16th of June, everything was almost finished. Or it began. From May 22nd, when the dragon cult entered the city, to June 16th, when the headquarters of the dragon cult in Taoshi Road was about to be completed, there were 16 canals, 19 roads, and 6 bridges outside the city of Wei. 24 other temples were built in different places. This was a huge project in any country in the world. However, both sides knew that these things did not necessarily have to be done, and the people who were grateful and felt that the heavens had bestowed them with blessings were actually just pawns. Both sides were using it, not for them, but for themselves. At the same time, in these 25 days, 36 low-level Taoist priests were killed. 21 of them died in the hands of the dragon cult. The other 15 people gradually realized that something was wrong, because their companions were killed by the demons. But the enlightened immortal Yunzi asked them to be patient again and again. The demons kept attacking them, and they had almost no means to protect themselves. These arrogant cultivators finally lost their pride, and suspected that Yunzi had ulterior motives. Fortunately, they still had brains. They did not question Yunzi face to face, but chose to escape from the city of Wei in one night. But within an hour, these 15 people were killed by Yunzi's doppelgangers one by one, and their souls were destroyed. Therefore, on the night of the 16th of June, Li Yunxin met Yunzi again in the residence of the Yu mansion. The enlightened immortal seemed to be very satisfied, and he did not even use his spirit to transform into the real body, but his real body. Right now he was truly alone in the city of Wei, He was the only one left in the entire city of Wei of the Pill Cauldron sect of the Shangqing sect. The strange deaths of the cultivators had long scared the servants who knew a thing or two out of their wits. They had all fled to the Egret continent. Li Yunxin had nearly 10,000 followers in the city of Wei, and more than 500 people came to the main altar to worship every day, although many of them came because of the embroidery of the qi made of silver foil. When they met again tonight, Li Yunxin was still leaning on the rattan chair and looking at Yunzi lazily. Your people are all dead, yet you still dared to come and see me like this. Two boys transformed from flowers moved Taoist Master Taoist's seat, so that he could sit opposite Li Yunxin. Then, Yunzi said calmly, they didn't do much when they were alive, but they were more useful when they were dead. I have come to tell you about the sacrificial offering to heaven, when the altar is completed. It's a sacrifice to Shinryu. Li Yunxin snorted. Oh, a sacrifice to Shinryu. Yunzi looked at him. I hope that when you ascend the altar tomorrow, it will rain. In this way, your power will be increased, and your followers will be more devout. The city of Wei is the center of Hejian land of the Daqing state. A heavy rain to save the people will be a miracle in Hejian land. It's much more reliable to spread the news from the city of Wei than from a remote place. Li Yunxin frowned and looked at him. You are so kind. It's a matter of mutual benefit, Yunzi said. You will be the first Yin god to show up in a big city and perform a miracle on a large scale. Then the Daotong will realize the seriousness of the matter. Then I will report the news of the cultivators being killed, and after the reprimand, I will still be in charge of the city of Wei. Then the Daotong will send real capable cultivators, not the previous useless ones. At that time, you will have to leave the city of Wei, but your story has been spread by those followers. Even the Daotong and the government can't get rid of those people's hidden thoughts. In essence, you have no loss. We all get what we want. Sounds good. Li Yunxin yawned. Then it's settled. You can leave. Yunzi didn't leave. Instead, he sat upright for a while. The Lord Tongtian shouldn't be such a person. Is the Lord Tongtian trying to provoke me? He asked. Li Yunxin squinted at him and ignored him. It's good for us to live in peace, Yunzi said again in a serious tone. If someone else came to the city of Wei, he might not sit back and do nothing. I'm the best choice for the Lord Tongtian. Li Yunxin waved his hand impatiently. Okay. Got it. But Yunzi still didn't leave. He stared at Li Yunxin carefully for a while and frowned. The Lord Tongtian's momentum seems to have weakened. Did he suffer some sort of injury that caused his cultivation level to drop? Tomorrow is a big event. We can't make any mistakes. Li Yunxin closed his eyes and kept silent for a while. Then he said only 4 words, the secret method of the dragons. A warm smile appeared on Yunzi's face, and she finally flew away. After another 3 breaths, Lu Laodao came out of the room and sat beside Li Yunxin. Li Yunxin sighed. He's going to take action. I'm here to see what's going on tonight. Lu Laodao just said in a low voice. Li Yunxin waved his hand as if he was driving away mosquitoes. Let's finish everything tomorrow. Under the acacia tree in the courtyard, the roots of an acacia flower trembled slightly and fell off in an instant. It was a rare cloudy day on the 17th of June. The sky was livid with heavy clouds. There was no wind. It was like a big steamer since the morning. But the people in the city of Wei didn't feel annoyed, because the clouds meant that it might rain. Many people in the city didn't do farm work. But in this day and age, there were no real city people. They all knew something about crops. Besides, today was the day when the headquarters of the dragon cult was completed. Everyone was happy. It was not that everyone was a believer. They just knew that the dragon cult was generous and had the support of the Yu's mansion. On normal days, they would give some money to the dragon cult. Today was an auspicious day. Therefore, at the first light of day, some people came to Taoshi Road with their families to occupy a good place. The headquarters was not an altar but a temple. But this temple couldn't be described as a big temple. The foundation was deep, and the platform was high. According to Li Yunxin's unique hobby, She has to climb 49 steps of white marble to get on the platform. If someone falls from the platform, he or she will fall to his or her death. The platform was big, and the floor was paved with green flagstones. The whole courtyard of the former Dragon King Temple of Lu Laodao was now just a main hall on the platform. The main body of the temple was covered with yellow glazed tiles. It looked magnificent. On a good day, it would even reflect golden light under the sunlight. Many people swore that they saw the Dragon God Temple in the Great Yi and the ruined palace in the city of Wei before it was burned down. Although their great-grandfathers were not born when the Great Yi was destroyed. But it was true. Li Yunxin asked people to build the temple according to the emperor's palace in his world. But the scale was reduced, and only a main hall was built. Fortunately, the Daqing state was still clean. He used some golden glazed tiles, so no one made trouble for him. Those who came early came to wait under the platform of the Dragon God Temple. When the auspicious time came, the dragon cult's leader would worship Shinryu on the platform. Maybe a lot of gold and silver would be sprinkled, but some people thought they came early. Others didn't leave last night. The weather was cool. They slept on the ground with their clothes. When the sky brightened, they were too hot to sleep. They started to chat. They talked about all kinds of strange things about the dragon cult. For example, someone saw the dragon cult's leader shoot out a golden light from his palm and split a mountain. In fact, people didn't believe it. People who heard it didn't believe it either. It was just like those folklores where someone met an immortal or was called by the king of hell to be a judge. But the people in the city of Wei had experienced several strange things. Although they didn't believe it, they were in awe of it. The more people gathered, the more rumors about the dragon cult's leader. After the morning, when it was almost noon, the Divine Dragon Temple was almost surrounded by a group of thousands of people. Thousands of people didn't stand in a tight line. They were randomly scattered on the ground. Even the half-demolished Taoshi Road, that had yet to be rebuilt, could not contain them. The crowd squeezed all the way to Willow Street outside Taoshi Road. There were so many people. Peddlers also came to sell food, toys, and small things. Since he was waiting, he would eat something and look at the little things while waiting. The whole Taoshi Road became a hubbub of people. Some people in the city, who didn't want to come, also came to join in the fun, after hearing that there was a market today. Some farmers who entered the city saw the crowd and asked around. Then they hurried home. Why did they go home? To prepare goods for the market. Commerce was not developed in this era. Many things that the farmers around the city of Wei needed were hard to get even in the shops in the city. There were no suitable places to sell the things that the farmers produced. Li Yunxin turned sour soup into a river on the Chongmen Street. That was the market. Once or twice a month, people around the city of Wei would go to the Chongmen Street to exchange goods. This was called going to the market. Right now, the Divine Dragon Cult's headquarters sacrificial ceremony has not yet begun, but unexpectedly a marketplace has been forcibly created. In the past, this was handled by the officials, but now the city of Wei was in a state of anarchy. The magistrate of the city didn't have time to care about this. He couldn't order the bailiffs. Thus, when it was time for noon, there were more than 10,000 people around. There were so many people, and the topic of their idle chatter was always related to Divine Dragon Cult. So gradually the topic was related to that cult leader. And gradually, some people said they had seen the cult master before. When did they see him? It was a few days before the Dragon King showed his divinity and burned the wild mountain. Coincidentally, there was a peddler selling sour soup in the market. Hearing this, he slapped his thigh and said with gritted teeth, "That's him." At first, people thought he was joking, so they teased him. Then the peddler told them about how his sour soup was painted into the river by the young man. That incident was widely spread in the city of Wei, so they knew it was not fake. Coincidentally, some of the customers were there that day, which confirmed the peddler's words. The peddler also said that he also went to the dragon cult a few days ago. He heard that they were generous and wanted to see if he could get a windfall. However, he didn't get any advantage, but met the dragon cult master face to face. Who else could it be but the young Taoist priest that day? At this point, it meant that the cult master of the dragon cult had been in the city of Wei before and made strange things. he was indeed a sublime person, or even a divine dragon. However, as the customers came and went, this topic was mentioned again and again. Hey, the peddler selling sour soup was punished by the dragon cult master. Finally, a person who lived in Egret Island and came to the city of Wei for business heard about it. This person thought for a while, and finally realized that he seemed to have seen the young man in Egret town. Of course, he had seen Li Yunxin. Almost everyone in Egret Island was a dragon cult follower. However, as the cult master Li Yunxin, it was hard to associate him with the passerby he met in Egret town. Until today, after hearing so much, he remembered the rare handsome appearance of the dragon cult master. Originally, this person planned to rush back to Egret Island. But before leaving the city, he passed by Taoshi Road. Being a lively person, he came to have a look and eat something before continuing his journey. At this time, he almost finished his food, so he didn't say much. Anyway, it was not strange that he had seen the cult master of the dragon cult in Egret Island. Everyone knew that the dragon cult started in Egret Island. However, just as he finished the soup in one gulp, put a coin on the table, and was about to get up and leave, the peddler who was busy behind the cart suddenly spoke to him. This peddler was originally talking too. He was just greeting people with a face full of smiles, and occasionally chatting with them. But just now, a gust of cold wind blew past, and the peddler's figure suddenly stiffened. Then he stopped what he was doing, and ignored the newcomers calling him, only staring straight at the passerby from Egret Island saying, "Tell me more." As he spoke, he slowly and inexpertly scooped another bowl of sour soup from the pot, and personally brought it over to the peddler. Then he also sat at the table and said, "I like to hear about him. Tell me more. When was the first time you saw him? What did he look like?" The passerby from Egret Island naturally felt that it was strange. But in any case, he was just a peddler, an ordinary person. Moreover, everyone was talking about the dragon cult master, so there was nothing to hide. Because of the bowl of steaming sour soup, he sat back down at the table and smiled. "Hey, about this matter. Actually, I'm not that hungry." "It's for you," the peddler said with a smile. "You know that person. You also heard from others just now he's had dealings with me. That's why I really want to know more about him. I feel that it's very interesting." The peddler's smile was like a mask hanging on his face. Even the passerby felt that it was a bit strange, but couldn't tell what was strange about it. A few other passerby called out to him a few times, but seeing that he didn't respond, they cursed and left. But the peddler didn't care, and only reached out to pat the passerby's hand. "Tell me." The Egret Island passerby suddenly felt at ease, and couldn't help but want to talk. Chapter 183. He picked up the chopsticks, and took a sip of the oily soup. He exhaled with satisfaction and said, "First time?" The first time was on the day after the wildfire broke out in the Wild Mountain. I remember clearly. It was said that there was a wildfire in the mountain that day. Many birds and beasts must have been burned to death. I went to pick them up. They were all good meat. I also thought it was a good thing. I got up early in the morning and rushed to the Wild Mountain. But when I went out, I lived near the water. I saw a young man in white standing on the bank of the estuary of Wei River and looking into the water. I saw him wearing the clothes of a rich family and heard about what happened in the city of Wei. I thought maybe his family was also in the city and wanted to jump into the river because they were in trouble. So I went to persuade him. But the young man turned around and left before I could persuade him. When I saw his face, hey, I couldn't forget it. That handsomeness. That's the face of a young man, not the face of us working people. Now thinking about it, I can't forget it. How many times can I see such a handsome man in my life? Alas, later. Your Excellency, are you sure? The peddler asked him calmly. It was the first time for the passerby to be called Your Excellency by a peddler selling sour soup. He was stunned, but this feeling of surprise was fleeting. He soon sighed with a bitter smile. I can't be wrong. Why can't I be wrong? That day, we rushed to the Wild Mountain for a whole day, but what happened? That mountain fire, oh my God. I'll be able to roast you from a distance of 40 to 50 feet. Burnt birds and carnivorous beasts? Bullshit. They were all burnt into charcoal. How can I remember it wrongly? One person can't catch up with it in his whole life. The peddler suddenly fell on the table. He knocked his forehead on the table with a loud thud. The passerby was startled, but after a breath, the peddler shook his head and opened his eyes. First, he looked around blankly, and then felt a splitting headache. He didn't know what had just happened, and why he was sitting opposite the guest. The passerby in egret was a little confused. He didn't know what was going on. The peddler was also confused. He felt empty, as if he had been hollowed out. The two of them stared at each other for a while, not quite understanding what had just happened. But someone already understood. The ghost passed through the crowd and went straight to the station of the Shangqing Danding sect. At the corner of an alley on Willow Street, a ferocious-looking general on horseback stared at the ghost for a while, then turned his horse and disappeared into the air silently. A quarter of an hour later, a passerby who happened to pass the station of the Shangqing Danding sect stopped and shivered slightly. Then he turned around, pushed open the black lacquered door of the residence, and walked straight into the main hall. On normal days, the two garrisons in the city of Wei were more majestic and mysterious than the yamen of the prefectural magistrate. At this time, even if the people were gone, their prestige still remained. There was no need to lock them. The passerby walked all the way to the main hall, and saw Yu Yunzi sitting in the middle of the hall. Enlightened being Dao attainment raised his head slightly, and took a glance before closing his eyes and meditating again. In half an hour, it will be the auspicious hour. Yunzi said calmly, "Today I will kill that dragon son. You don't need to give me any more advice." The possessed passerby was a young servant wearing a green hat. He had a hairy beard and a few freckles on his face. He looked like a half-grown child. But now, with a solemn and serious voice, the child said to an enlightened Taoist master, "You are mistaken. That's not Long's son, it's Li Yunxin." Yunzi did not open his eyes. He disguised himself as Li Yunxin and called himself Li Yunxin. "I know all that. I am thinking of something. Don't bother me if you have nothing to say. Take care of this, and we may work together in the future, but don't let I hate you." The servant looked at Yunzi and said seriously, "It's not like that, Li Yunxin. It's the only son of Li Chunfeng and his wife, the real Li Yunxin. He's not Long's son, he's just Li Yunxin. The night Long Jizi died, he didn't die." Yunzi opened his eyes. Then he frowned slightly. The servant took a step forward. "In order to prevent you from making any mistakes today, I have inquired about a lot of news in the city these days. And today, I got the last bit of evidence. The night Long Jizi fought with the cultivator Ling Kongzi of your sect was April 19th. Emperor Li passed away on the 19th of April. 6 hours later, on April 20th, Emperor Li achieved the Ghost Emperor's body. April 22nd, 5 cultivators of Daotong pursued the Ghost Emperor but failed. They fought for 3 days and 3 nights. April 28th, the seriously injured Ghost Emperor broke into the Tongtian Sea and fought with Long Jizi hatred. On the 29th of April, Yizi disappeared. Taoist Yunzi. More than one person said that after April 20th. Then Li Yunxin appeared in the Egret Island. You said that Li Yunxin is the incarnation of hatred. On April 20th, hatred was still in the Tongtian Sea. If he came to the Wei River and turned into Li Yunxin, how could he fight with the Ghost Emperor? After saying that, the manservant didn't say anything else and only looked at Yu Yunzi. The truth state Taoist's expression was frozen on his face, and he didn't try to hide it. This went on for a long time. It meant that he was so focused on something else that he didn't even care about his own expression. After a quarter of an hour, Yunzi let out a long sigh with a solemn expression. He stood up and paced a few steps. As he walked, he looked at the servant who was possessed by Lin Liangzi, frowned and said hesitantly, "How could I know that you didn't set me up?" "You know that's not a reasonable deduction," the servant said calmly. The manservant said calmly, "Our common interest is greater than our common interest with Li Yunxin. But you're looking for the jade chip of enlightenment." "We're looking for the jade chip of enlightenment," the servant said in a low voice. "And as far as I know, the jade chip of enlightenment is no longer with Li Yunxin." Dragon Sun took it away with Chi Kiss. After Dragon Sun died, his palace disappeared, so it can be concluded that it was taken away by Lord Dongting. If you can find the jade chip of enlightenment from Lord Dongting, you're a better partner than Li Yunxin. And he's just a kid. A kid, but he also deceived me. Yunzi sighed and accepted Lin Liangzi's statement. He looked up at the sky. The auspicious time is coming. Lin Liangzi frowned. What are you going to do? Yunzi shook his head, but smiled slightly. What to do? Haha, do you know what a good plan is? Without waiting for Lin Liangzi to answer, he walked out of the door and said loudly, there are always loopholes in a bad plan. It can only be used to deal with blind and stupid people. A good plan is delicate and meticulous, and it's more than enough to deal with stupid people. However, if it's used to deal with smart people, once a step is not calculated well, and a mistake is made, the whole plan will be out of control. And a good plan is to leave room everywhere and deal with changes by not changing. No matter what he does, I'll stand firm. What I have is a good plan. So what should I do? Just act according to the plan. Yunzi stepped out of the door, the corner of his robe flashed by the door, and his voice came through the door. My honorable guest, please wait here. After I take the head of that kid Li Yunxin, I'll come back to discuss the plan with you. Where did you find this group of people? Li Yunxin frowned, looking at a group of people who were preparing on the white jade platform on the 49th step of the Dragon King Temple. There were performers of gongs, drums, swona, eru and flute. There were men and women who looked like demons and ghosts, wearing red and green clothes. There were a lot of unknown brands of fans and ceremonial guards, and there were also some people who were wearing formal clothes, but not formal clothes. Right now, he was busying himself with a solemn expression. Well, it's the old system, Lu Laodao explained. Children, Dragon King ceremonial guards and so on. Brother Xian, look at the ceremonial officer in red. That's General Crab. Okay. Li Yunxin sighed. That means I have to talk to them later. Yes. These ceremonial officers are imitating the two groups of ministers in front of Lord Dragon King. Brother Xian is on the seat of honor. Where's the dragon throne? I'll go and urge. Li Yunxin was no longer listening when he said these words. He was looking elsewhere. They were standing on the platform, under the red corridor of the main hall of the Dragon King Temple. The people below the platform couldn't see them, but they could see the sea of tens of thousands of people. It was a magnificent sight. Li Yunxin turned her head to look behind her. Then he waved his hand. There's no need. I don't think it'll last long. Lu Laodao was stunned, followed his gaze, and saw Yunzi walking toward them. Anyone with a discerning eye could see the expression of the Taoist priest. Curiosity, mockery, and doubt. Go away. Okay. Lu Laodao didn't hesitate, turned around and walked away quickly. Yunzi didn't care about the Taoist priest's departure. His eyes were fixed on Li Yunxin in white. He stopped 3 steps in front of him and said, You're not hatred. Li Yunxin was slightly taken aback, and then she smiled. Please recall. I never said I was. You're Li Yunxin. He smiled again. You remember I never said I wasn't. Good. Yunzi squinted his eyes. I was fooled by you. Heroes come from the young. Yunzi snorted. Your sharp tongue, did you learn it from your late father Li Chunfeng? Li Yunxin was silent for a while, then stopped smiling. Talk is talk. Don't ask about other people's parents. Why, are you going to complain to my parents? Yunzi also smiled coldly. Humph. Also, you used to be in society, and I heard you were an official, right? Li Yunxin interrupted him. Then do you understand the principle that one's wife and children shouldn't be harmed? Immortals have many ways to extort confessions from mortals, but they don't have to cut people open. Let's interview. What's your mentality? Yunzi was silent for a while, thinking that it was unwise and degrading to quarrel with a teenager. Not a teenager incarnated by the Lord Tongtian. So he changed the topic and said in a low voice, What about the Lord Tongtian? Are these your tricks or the Lord Tongtian's? I have no comment. Yunzi looked at Li Yunxin's demeanor and expression, and suddenly laughed. Good. He raised his hand and twirled his beard. I saw through your identity. But you didn't panic, and still didn't fall into a disadvantageous position. Exactly the same as when I was a teenager. I know you're acting like this because you're afraid, but you really don't have to be afraid. What I said before still stands. Since you're a human and not a demon, it's easier to talk about this. Daotong wants the translucent jade slip, but I don't. On the contrary, I need a smart helper. However, whether you follow the Lord Tongtian or me, I won't make things difficult for you. As long as you don't go against me. As for the Lord Tongtian, is actually a dragon lady? That's interesting. Yunzi shook his head gently. But she can pretend to be your servant and play along with you. So she's not a rude and stupid demon. Things can still be done. You're really a smart person. Li Yunxin smiled and turned to look in the direction of the front of the hall. A good show is about to start. We have time to talk about it in detail. Look, the auspicious time has come. As soon as he finished speaking, the gong sounded. The big gong was erected on a thick wooden frame at the end of the steps, and it was taller than a person. It was very much like the big drum that Li Yunxin had seen before, but he didn't know why it was changed to a gong in this world. The ceremonial officer in red silk knocked 21 times with all his strength, and the sound was earth-shattering, making people's ears numb. But such a sound only made those people in front of the temple turn their heads slightly and stop what they were doing. More people were still doing what they were doing. Originally, they were here to watch the fun, but now it had become a market. What could be more lively than a market? Yunzi, who was walking slowly beside Li Yunxin, smiled and said, "This is not a good sign. After all, you are still a young man. It will be much better for the Lord Tongtian to come forward." Li Yunxin paused by the side of the big gong and reached out to press down on the still buzzing gong. Then he turned to look at Yunzi. "You are just afraid that we are playing tricks, and you want to see Dragon Lady. She didn't go anywhere else, she is just staying in the temple. If you want to see her, I will ask her to come out." "I want to see her," Yunzi said. "Sanhua, come out." Li Yunxin did not hesitate to shout into the hall. At this time, the group of people on the stage, which Li Yunxin scolded as a grassroots troupe, were unhurriedly getting into position and getting into formation. In this era, there were no professional ceremonial companies, and a lot of this kind of work was done by the troupe. They had seen many big scenes, so they did not have stage fright. They lined up in an orderly manner, and the actors in the civil and military official costumes stood lazily, and the vocal troupe also sat on the side. As soon as the master gave the order, the music started, and they immediately cheered up and threw themselves into their roles. In Li Yunxin's eyes, it was like a child's play, but the people in the city of Wei liked it very much. No one wanted to listen to tedious speeches and preferred to watch the troupe's performance. It was said that there were famous actors in the city of Wei on the stage. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.